Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Stephen Buffalo. I'm from the Samson Cree Nation up in Treaty 6. And tonight, we recognize we're in the Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Kainai, the Siksika, and the Piikani, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney Nakoda tribes of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and also the Métis region within Region 3. For our people, and all the people who came before us, and all the people who will come after us, and who all are here tonight, let's have a great discussion about our great province. I'd like to introduce a former junior breed teammate of mine, Bruce McAllister, your moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen Buffalo. I should mention to you all as well, Stephen is a scout for your Lethbridge Hurricanes, so if things don't go well, you know where to pin the blame. If he was a teammate of mine, he couldn't have been a very good talent scout, I can tell you that. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Great to see you all. What a wonderful crowd here in Lethbridge. Thanks for coming out tonight. As Stephen said, my name is Bruce McAllister, and I'm pleased to be your moderator here this evening. Do my best to keep things on track. The Premier is with us tonight. Nice to see you. We have an amazing panel assembled. It's my job tonight to try and make sure you hear from them all at some point, although we want to hear from you more. I want to make sure that you get to hear from you hear from every one of them at least once, so I'll do that tonight. But like you, I've had, or like you, I should say, they're passionate about this province, and they've given us some time over the last few months to travel with us from city to city. I'm not even sure what number this is, maybe seven cities. So they've given a lot of time, and they bring a lot of expertise and perspective. So we're really happy to have them. I'll introduce them momentarily. But again, thank you all for coming. The point of the evening from our perspective tonight is to get your perspective on the issues. It's been an interesting 10 years or so with Ottawa, so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Some of the things, the way they're structured, what we might do differently, what your opinions are of those. A couple of housekeeping rules. I know this won't apply to the great majority of you here tonight, but I have to say it every time we do this. Please be respectful. Mind your language. Don't use any that Stephen might have in the dressing room way back when. We ask that you limit yourselves to one question at the microphone, and that is so we can hear from as many of you as possible, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we get set up here. We'd like the questions to be on topic as well. So the evening will be separated into 7 sections. We'll play these videos, and then we'll discuss that video, and we'll have some time at the end as well if something to do with Ottawa didn't come up, or if we ran out of time in a particular section and you want to address it at the end. So again, more to come on that, but before I explain any more, let's meet our panel. First of all, please welcome the Premier of Alberta, the Chair of Alberta Next, Premier Smith. We have MLA Brandon Lunty with us. Brandon, thank you. MLA Tara Sawyer, recently elected in Olds Didsbury Three Hills. Dr. Benny Zhu is here, a registered acupuncturist, 30 years experience. The President of the Business Council of Alberta, Adam Legg, is here. The President and CEO of the Indian Resource Council of Canada, you've met him already, that's Stephen Buffalo. From the University of Calgary, an economics professor, fiscal policy expert. It's really fun to listen to him and Premier talk about issues. Dr. Trevor Toombs with us tonight. The Honourable Bruce MacDonald, former Alberta Court of Appeal Justice from 2009 to 2023. Bruce. We have a family and emergency room doctor from from Didsbury, and that is Dr. Aiken Osakwati. Dr. Aiken. Pretty strong rural advocate, certainly, is MLA Glenn Van Dyken, who we'll hear from tonight as well. Glenn. Another leader in agriculture, Melody Garner-Skiba, will talk to us about agriculture. Melody, welcome. The chair of the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism is Sumita Aman. Please welcome her. From the Fraser Institute, Andrew Judson. The president and CEO of Whitecap Resources is Grant Fagerheim. And we have a few panelists away tonight, Minister Rebecca Schultz and Michael Binion. We always miss them, but anyway, you all will have to pick up the slack tonight, okay? So maybe to set the stage for us, to set the scene a little bit, as I mentioned, it's been an interesting decade dealing with Ottawa. So these are some of the issues we're going to discuss about what some of the alternatives might be, what some of your suggestions might be. Before we get into that, let's welcome Premier Danielle Smith to greet you.
Well, thank you so much. It is so great to see such a huge turnout tonight. I know that there's lots of things you could be doing with one of the last beautiful days of summer, and we're so glad that you decided to spend it with us. Also happy to share the stage with my fellow panelists who've been with me as we traveled to Red Deer, to Edmonton, to the southern borders here tonight, not only in Lethbridge, but we've been in Medicine Hat, up north to Fort McMurray, and then later this month to Grand Prairie as well. And tonight we are pleased to be here in one of Alberta's most dynamic and important cities. Lethbridge punches far above its weight as one of the most important agricultural regions in Canada, as the home to a world-class university, Canada's first regional quantum computing lab, and a top-ranked polytechnic institution that helps to shape Alberta's skilled workforce and support our economic growth, and as one of the most strategic transportation and logistics centers in the province. We know that billions of dollars worth of goods flow north and south through Lethbridge each year, thanks to this critical location along critical trade corridors. And it's a good reminder of what's at stake right now, as Canada finds its way forward with our biggest trading partners, and as Alberta finds its way forward within Canada. I want to thank you for coming to share your thoughts with us today and for choosing to participate in this crucial engagement process. And the conversations that we have tonight and throughout the Alberta Next engagement period, which comes to an end, I think the last one we're doing is October 1st, which will be a telephone town hall, is going to shape the future of our province. And I'd encourage you to go and look at the last time the government did this with the Fair Deal panel that did forums very much like this. They came up with 25 recommendations, which is fair to say has guided our work over the last 5 years. For instance, it suggested that we have an equalization referendum, which we did. The panel wanted us to reduce internal trade barriers, and we have done that across the country. Wanted us to create economic corridors, and we have signed many economic corridors agreements. They wanted us to challenge federal legislation in our areas of jurisdiction, and I think we've got about 15 lawsuits going in that regard. They wanted us to establish a chief firearms officer, which we did. Create a presence in Ottawa, which we have. They wanted us to diversify our energy sector, which we have done so in spades. Relentlessly pursue more market access. Check that box too. And of course, the idea for referenda and citizen-initiated referenda also came out of that process. And that's just the kind of example of ideas that have come out of this kind of process. So as Bruce said, for the last 10 years, Ottawa has taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries, from C69 to the tanker ban, the oil and gas emissions cap, which really works like a production cap, and their net zero mandates on electricity and vehicles. In just the last 10 years alone, more than $500 billion of global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared. It's cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs, hundreds of billions in GDP and resource royalties that would have gone to help us pay for our growing demands in healthcare, education, and infrastructure. If Canada is to be a strong and unified country, it must include a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, able to pursue our own potential without being held back by our own country. So regardless of what each of us believes about these issues or which path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues here with friends and family members and neighbours. And I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the best solutions for the immense challenges that we face and come out stronger and freer than ever. I will always put my faith in Albertans to find the right path forward. I trust you. And I look forward to hearing from you tonight and from all Albertans across the province as we finish this process. Back over to you, Bruce. Thank you. Thanks,
All right, thank you, Premier. As I said earlier, we have 6 videos to prepare to watch tonight and then discuss. Here's what the videos will contain in terms of content. The first one will be on equalization and transfers. The second on a possible Alberta pension plan. The third on a possible provincial police force. The fourth on constitutional changes. The fifth on immigration reform. And the sixth on provincial tax collection. So here's how it works. We will play a video, and then if you want to speak to that video, and you don't have to necessarily ask a question. If you just want to make a comment, make a suggestion on how we might deal with it, come to the microphone to speak to that topic, and we will give you 45 seconds to do so. And I try my very best to let you finish your question if you're very close, and inevitably some people forget that there was a 45-second timer. I'll do my best to keep it on track and be respectful at the same time, but 45 seconds is what we set. It is not the time for local issue discussion. Inevitably, there'll be people saying, I want to talk about healthcare or this or education. Minister Nathan Neudorf is going to be a busy guy because he's here tonight, and he gets to handle all of those questions. And his staff is here, and I think Grant Hunters is as well. But tonight is about Alberta Next, about our relationship with Ottawa, and about our future, and your opinions and thoughts on what we might do. So while the video plays, again, feel free to line up at that microphone if that is the subject that you wish to speak to. If you have a question, great, and a comment is fine as well. And remember, we'll hold everybody to account in terms of civility. And we're in Lethbridge, so that's not going to be an issue at all. I know that. Right? I did play hockey in Medicine Hat, so I know that's not true. But it's going to be a great night, folks. Looking forward to it. So without further ado, our first video is on equalization and transfers. Here's the video.
Our next topic is reforming federal equalization and transfers. Since 2005, Alberta taxpayers have contributed, on average, $23 billion more per year to the federal government in federal taxes than they received back in projects, benefits, and other spending from Ottawa. That's a net loss to Albertans of nearly $500 billion in just 20 years. Most of those redistributed
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Stephen Buffalo. I'm from the Samson Cree Nation up in Treaty 6. And tonight, we recognize we're in the Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Kainai, the Siksika, and the Piikani, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Stoney Nakoda tribes of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and also the Métis region within Region 3. For our people, and all the people who came before us, and all the people who will come after us, and who all are here tonight, let's have a great discussion about our great province. I'd like to introduce a former junior breed teammate of mine, Bruce McAllister, your moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen Buffalo. I should mention to you all as well, Stephen is a scout for your Lethbridge Hurricanes, so if things don't go well, you know where to pin the blame. If he was a teammate of mine, he couldn't have been a very good talent scout, I can tell you that. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Great to see you all. What a wonderful crowd here in Lethbridge. Thanks for coming out tonight. As Stephen said, my name is Bruce McAllister, and I'm pleased to be your moderator here this evening. Do my best to keep things on track. The Premier is with us tonight. Nice to see you. We have an amazing panel assembled. It's my job tonight to try and make sure you hear from them all at some point, although we want to hear from you more. I want to make sure that you get to hear from you hear from every one of them at least once, so I'll do that tonight. But like you, I should say, they're passionate about this province, and they've given us some time over the last few months to travel with us from city to city. I'm not even sure what number this is, maybe seven cities. So they've given a lot of time, and they bring a lot of expertise and perspective. So we're really, really happy to have them. I'll introduce them momentarily. But again, thank you all for coming. The point of the evening from our perspective tonight is to get your perspective on the issues. It's been an interesting 10 years or so with Ottawa, so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Some of the things, the way they're structured, what we might do differently, what your opinions are of those. A couple of housekeeping rules. I know this won't apply to the great majority of you here tonight, but I have to say it every time we do this. Please be respectful. Mind your language. Don't use any that Stephen might have in the dressing room way back when. We ask that you limit yourselves to one question at the microphone, and that is so we can hear from as many of you as possible, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as we get set up here. We'd like the questions to be on topic as well. So the evening will be separated into 7 sections. We'll play these videos, and then we'll discuss that video, and we'll have some time at the end as well if something to do with Ottawa didn't come up, or if we ran out of time in a particular section and you want to address it at the end. So again, more to come on that, but before I explain any more, let's meet our panel. First of all, please welcome the Premier of Alberta, the Chair of Alberta Next, Premier Smith. We have MLA Brandon Lunty with us. Brandon, thank you. MLA Tara Sawyer, recently elected in Olds Didsbury Three Hills. Dr. Benny Zhu is here, a registered acupuncturist, 30 years experience. The President of the Business Council of Alberta, Adam Legg, is here. The President and CEO of the Indian Resource Council of Canada, you've met him already, that's Stephen Buffalo. From the University of Calgary, an economics professor, fiscal policy expert. It's really fun to listen to him and Premier talk about issues. Dr. Trevor Toombs with us tonight. The Honourable Bruce MacDonald, former Alberta Court of Appeal Justice from 2009 to 2023. Bruce. We have a family and emergency room doctor from from Didsbury, and that is Dr. Aiken Osakwati. Dr. Aiken. Pretty strong rural advocate, certainly, is MLA Glenn Van Dyken, who we'll hear from tonight as well. Glenn. Another leader in agriculture, Melody Garner-Skiba, will talk to us about agriculture. Melody, welcome. The chair of the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism is Sumita Aman. Please welcome her. From the Fraser Institute, Andrew Judson. The president and CEO of Whitecap Resources is Grant Fagerheim. And we have a few panelists away tonight, Minister Rebecca Schultz and Michael Binion. We always miss them, but anyway, you all will have to pick up the slack tonight, okay? So maybe to set the stage for us, to set the scene a little bit, as I mentioned, it's been an interesting decade dealing with Ottawa. So these are some of the issues we're going to discuss about what some of the alternatives might be, what some of your suggestions might be. Before we get into that, let's welcome Premier Danielle Smith to greet you.
you so much. It is so great to see such a huge turnout tonight. I know that there's lots of things you could be doing with one of the last beautiful days of summer, and we're so glad that you decided to spend it with us. Also happy to share the stage with my fellow panelists who've been with me as we traveled to Red Deer, to Edmonton, to the southern borders here tonight, not only in Lethbridge, but we've been in Medicine Hat, up north to Fort McMurray, and then later this month to Grand Prairie as well. And tonight we are pleased to be here in one of Alberta's most dynamic and important cities. Lethbridge punches far above its weight as one of the most important agriculture regions in Canada, as the home to a world-class university, Canada's first regional quantum computing lab, and a top-ranked polytechnic institution that helps to shape Alberta's skilled workforce and support our economic growth, and as one of the most strategic transportation and logistics centers in the province. We know that billions of dollars worth of goods flow north and south through Lethbridge each year, thanks to this critical location along critical trade corridors. And it's a good reminder of what's at stake right now, as Canada finds its way forward with our biggest trading partners, and as Alberta finds its way forward within Canada. I want to thank you for coming to share your thoughts with us today and for choosing to participate in this crucial engagement process. And the conversations that we have tonight and throughout the Alberta Next engagement period, which comes to an end, I think the last one we're doing is October 1st, which will be a telephone town hall, is going to shape the future of our province. And I'd encourage you to go and look at the last time the government did this with the Fair Deal panel that did forums very much like this. They came up with 25 recommendations, which is fair to say has guided our work over the last 5 years. For instance, it suggested that we have an equalization referendum, which we did. The panel wanted us to reduce internal trade barriers, and we have done that across the country. Wanted us to create economic corridors, and we have signed many economic corridors agreements. They wanted us to challenge federal legislation in our areas of jurisdiction, and I think we've got about 15 lawsuits going in that regard. They wanted us to establish a chief firearms officer, which we did. Create a presence in Ottawa, which we have. They wanted us to diversify our energy sector, which we have done so in spades. Relentlessly pursue more market access. Check that box too. And of course, the idea for referenda and citizen-initiated referenda also came out of that process. And that's just the kind of example of ideas that have come out of this kind of process. So as Bruce said, for the last 10 years, Ottawa has taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries, from C-69 to the tanker ban, the oil and gas emissions cap, which really works like a production cap, and their net zero mandates on electricity and vehicles. In just the last 10 years alone, more than $500 billion of global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared. It's cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs, hundreds of billions in GDP and resource royalties that would have gone to help us pay for our growing demands in healthcare, education, and infrastructure. If Canada is to be a strong and unified country, it must include a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, able to pursue our own potential without being held back by our own country. So regardless of what each of us believes about these issues or which path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues here with friends and family members and neighbors. And I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the best solutions for the immense challenges that we face and come out stronger and freer than ever. I will always put my faith in Albertans to find the right path forward. I trust you. And I look forward to hearing from you tonight and from all Albertans across the province as we finish this process. Back over to you, Bruce. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Premier. As I said earlier, we have 6 videos to prepare to watch tonight and then discuss. Here's what the videos will contain in terms of content. The first one will be on equalization and transfers. The second on a possible Alberta pension plan. The third on a possible provincial police force. The fourth on constitutional changes, the fifth on immigration reform, and the sixth on provincial tax collection. So here's how it works. We will play a video, and then if you want to speak to that video, and you don't have to necessarily ask a question. If you just want to make a comment, make a suggestion on how we might deal with it, come to the microphone to speak to that topic, and we will give you 45 seconds to do so. And I try my very best to let you finish your question if you're very close. And inevitably, some people forget that there was a 45-second timer. I'll do my best to keep it on track and be respectful at the same time, but 45 seconds is what we set. It is not the time for local issue discussion. Inevitably, there'll be people saying, I want to talk about healthcare or this or education. Minister Nathan Newdorf is going to be a busy guy because he's here tonight, and he gets to handle all of those questions. And his staff is here, and I think Grant Hunters is as well. But tonight is about Alberta Next, about our relationship with Ottawa, and about our future, and your opinions and thoughts on what we might do. So while the video plays, again, feel free to line up at that microphone if that is the subject that you wish to speak to. If you have a question, great, and a comment is fine as well. And remember, we'll hold everybody to account in terms of civility. And we're in Lethbridge, so that's not going to be an issue at all. I know that. Right? I did play hockey in Medicine Hat, so I know that's not true. But it's going to be a great night, folks. Looking forward to it. So without further ado, our first video is on equalization and transfers. Here's the video.
Our next topic is reforming federal equalization and transfers. Since 2005, Alberta taxpayers have contributed, on average, $23 billion more per year to the federal government in federal taxes than they received back in projects, benefits, and other spending from Ottawa. That's a net loss to Albertans of nearly $500 billion in just 20 years. Most of those redistributed Alberta tax dollars are spent by Ottawa and Quebec and other liberal-leaning provinces across the country. And part of that massive fiscal transfer out of Alberta comes through the Federal Equalization Program, which has seen Alberta pay over $67 billion into the program since 1957, while receiving back not a single penny since 1965. In 2021, Albertans voted in a referendum to remove equalization from the Constitution, but Ottawa completely ignored us. So what next? Alberta can't stop these federal transfers on its own. The Alberta government doesn't write a check to Ottawa each year, and we can't ask Albertans to stop paying their federal taxes. The fact is, fixing this problem will require political support from other provinces. One option that would be appealing to most other provinces is to have the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes. This is how it could work. Currently, Ottawa collects over 60% of all the federal and provincial taxes that Canadians pay. The Ottawa bureaucracy takes its portion, with the remainder inefficiently and unequally distributed to the provinces. The dollars we do get back have a lot of strings attached, forcing us to run our provincial programs and build infrastructure the way Ottawa wants us to. No provinces want that, especially the big ones like Quebec, Ontario, BC, and Alberta. What if we cut out the middleman and instead had provincial governments that are responsible for delivering health, education, and social services collect around 60% of all taxes, with Ottawa receiving the rest? Ottawa, in turn, would be able to end most transfer programs to the provinces, along with all the strings, bureaucracy, and waste attached to them. Quebec has already proposed having the federal government let provinces keep GST revenue generated in their provinces in return for ending the federal health transfer. Seems like a great idea. Why not apply that same logic to all federal transfers? Less money collected and wasted in Ottawa. Less federal transfers with only a modest amount of equalization for the smallest provinces and territories that actually need it. And more funds for provincial health, education, and other programs, without strings attached by Ottawa's politicians and bureaucrats. That seems like something most provinces could rally behind. So what say you, Alberta? Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization by having the provinces collect a larger share of overall taxes, with Ottawa collecting less? And are there any other strategies Alberta should be looking at to alleviate the massive federal fiscal drain to Alberta? For more information, visit alberta.ca/next.
Okay. I thought some of you would be lining up at the microphones already while the video played. So again, on equalization and transfers. That's the first topic. And you're first, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi. I was just wondering, I know that you, Madam Premier, have commented on the fact that often Alberta does not feel seen within our country of Canada. And because of that, I know that you would never want your own citizens to feel that way within our own province. So I was just wondering if we could hear from the member on the panel who doesn't feel like we should be changing how taxes are collected and why.
Okay, did somebody hear the rest of that question? Ma'am, could you just repeat the question? Did it have to do with equalization and transfers?
Yes, I was asking, like, who on the panel does not feel that we should be changing how this is currently done and why?
Oh, okay. Well, let's do this instead. There's some great context on equalization and transfers that we want to talk about and to see what we might do differently. Why don't we go to the professor first and ask him? Dr. Toom, could I ask you to add some context to this lady's question and equalization and transfers in general?
Sure. So some context in relation to the question is, I think, very important that social, economic, international developments and factors are changing all the time. And so a country needs to ensure that its policies evolve with those changes. And so it's not like we should always be settling for the way the policy is at any given moment. We should always be seeking out ways to improve it, at least in terms of fiscal policy and equalization in particular. This is a very important set of issues, and not just for Alberta. We've been having disputes in Canada throughout our history on how federal public finances are structured, how transfers are structured. And Canada's very diverse. Economies and cultures and histories differ so much from one part of the country to another that it's hard to balance all of these different issues and interests. And so typically throughout history, you have different regions at different times raising concerns about different features of the transfer systems, and typically the federal government responds with reforms. And often there's a lot of compromise involved in there as well. But right now, we've had the current equalization formula in place for nearly 2 decades, which is going on the longest period of no substantive change to that program in history. Typically, we make substantive changes every 5 years or so. And it's not just Alberta that's raising concerns here either. At an event this morning, actually, that the School of Public Policy hosted, we had the leader of the Parti Québécois. And if the polls are any indication, that's potentially the next premier of Quebec too. And even he raised a lot of concerns with fiscal arrangements. And it might surprise some here today, concerns around equalization in particular, noting that receiving money is never a good thing from an economic development perspective. Or going on to say that we must be careful with money that comes out of the sky because it kills entrepreneurship. And so there's a lot of changes that we could make to programs like equalization. I certainly have a lot of ideas. Other members of the panel have ideas as well, but that's kind of what we want to hear from you tonight, like what your ideas might be for how Alberta should approach these issues.
All right, Dr. Toom, thank you for kicking us off. Thank you for the question. We'll go to the other microphone over here.
Hello, I'm Katie Aurora, and I find this video to be incredibly hypocritical and kind of propagandistic. It really misrepresents how equalization even works and ignores the fact that a big part of the reason why we do not get equalization payments is just the fact that we refuse to adopt similar tax policies to other provinces. And just in general, it really plays into this grievance politics thing that you guys really seem to like, where you will turn down federal funding for things like, pharmacare and dental care and housing initiatives for cities, and then turn around and say the federal government doesn't want to give us any money. And it's hypocritical.
Okay. Thank you. You don't like the video. I get it. However, Premier, sometimes you like to respond to some of this on equalization, and Trevor raised a good point about Quebec. Is there anything you want to touch on?
Only that the fact that the equalization program has been modified many times over the years, and as Trevor has pointed out in previous panels, this one hasn't been changed since 2007. And that's a very long time for us not to reconsider it. And I guess I would maybe offer the reverse of what the last speaker said, is that we find that there are some fundamental unfairness measures that are in the equalization formula. For instance, Quebec subsidizes its electricity. And if they were to pay market rates for electricity, or even 2 cents more, Trevor has calculated that they would get $4 billion less in equalization because they'd have own source revenue. So that the equalization formula rewards them for subsidizing their electricity and reducing their own income stream. And I would say as well that it has rewarded provinces for keeping their own resources in the ground. In fact, Pauline Marois from the Parti Québécois, when she was premier before, said that she didn't want to develop her natural gas resources because it would reduce equalization. And I think those are the reasons why we need to discuss about a new formula. It needs to be fair. Big, strong, powerful economies like Quebec and Ontario and British Columbia and Alberta should not be receiving transfers from smaller jurisdictions. The smaller jurisdictions, you can make an argument that they need to be able to provide roughly equivalent programs for roughly equivalent tax rates, but they've gotten well away from that principle.
On equalization and transfers, go ahead.
I've been following a few YouTubers like Mr. Sunshine Baby and Moose on the Loose and things like that. And I find that we pay 5 times more taxes than any other province. And with the equalization payments, that I think that is part of the taxes, and Ottawa keeps taking our money and they don't care about Alberta. And I think we should do something different other than equalization, and that if we want to support the smaller provinces, like you said, then we can give them directly rather than give it to Ottawa.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. We'll go over here.
Oh, yes. Hello. My name is Ted Poppett from Lethbridge.
Hey, Ted.
And I have 2 questions, really. The first one is, has anybody on the panel looked at the federal tax return for residents of Quebec? If so, you would see that Quebec, and Quebec only, excuse me, gets to deduct off their total federal tax amount 16.5%. Only in Quebec does that happen. And that happened because over the years, Quebec has opted out of federal programs and said they would administer themselves those programs. So that's why the feds give them that 16.5% deduction off their federal tax, even though the tax rates are the same across provinces federally.
Okay.
That 16.5% is there.
Second question.
Second question. I've written, actually, Premier Smith, to some of your ministers many times over this. Why doesn't Alberta just opt out of those programs like Quebec did, so there's precedent for that, and get a deduction for Alberta residents of federal tax that then goes to Alberta, so we could manage those programs ourselves?
Thank you, Ted. That was about 46 seconds. So we'll just ask everyone else to tighten it up just a little bit. Premier, do you want to respond to Ted?
Someone may be able to respond to why it is Quebec has that difference in taxes. My understanding is that the speaker was exactly right, that they have arranged to have that tax point transfer. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about in this video, is should we be doing more of that ourselves? And so I heard him vote in favor of yes. And so that would be something that I think that we were trying to get. What this process is these are the kind of ideas that have been talked about in political circles, and we're just trying to see if there is an appetite for us to pursue them in the broader public. So thanks for your feedback on that.
Yep, super. Grant, I'll come to you in a minute, okay? Let's go over here.
So just a bit of a preamble. The numbers and the investigation that goes into developing the formulas for equalization are very complex. Never once has this panel showed them to people or talked about that complexity and how they're arrived at. I find every one of these videos to be a leading video. They're trying to drag the viewer to a certain point. Premier Smith's point or the panel's point, and they're not completely impartial the way that they should be. Neither are the figures that are presented. There's no background to the figures. You're just spewing them out and saying, here we are, we tell the truth every time we open our mouths. And we know that's not true, especially for politicians.
Let's go over here. Go ahead.
Hi there, my name is Richard. I just want to say that I think it's a good idea. Anything that we can do to put some distance between us and Ottawa is a good thing. Anything that we can do to yeah, I think most people here would agree with that. Anything we can do to make Alberta stronger, perhaps collect all the taxes that we can, and maybe send federal tax to Ottawa that we've collected in our province and put us in the driver's seat.
All right.
I just wonder, this would require constitutional change. Is that by a 750 rule, or is it constitutional change required?
Hey, Richard, we've got one of the topics tonight. One of the videos is constitutional change. It's coming up, so we'll dive right into this. But great question. I'd like to ask Grant to share with us a little bit. Expert in the oil and gas industry. Did you want to speak to this topic, Grant?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of comments. Certainly we respect everyone's opinion here. And what I can say is that Danielle Smith, our Premier, she is fighting the fight for this province. So you have to understand that from a resource development perspective. Canada is the fourth largest oil producer in the world. We produce 5 million barrels a day of production. We are proud to share it with the rest of Canada, the revenues from those resources. And if you think about what we have in Alberta, we're 2.4 times the reserves than the U.S., yet they produce 13 million barrels a day. We produce, as I say, 5 million barrels a day. So from our perspective, what we're wanting to do within the province, and certainly supporting the Premier with this, is knowing that the energy sector is we'll call it the primary economic driver for Canada. Our objective here is it's not as though we're not afraid to share, but we've been sharing for a very long period of time with our resources and our resource revenue with the rest of Canada. So what we want to do is be able to unleash, what I call unleash the beast, and grow our resources so everyone in Alberta, but the rest of Canada, can share in our wealth. Thank you.
I'd like to get through the last speaker at each microphone before we go to the next, or I'll ask a question afterwards. So let's start here.
As a person born in Nova Scotia, a province that does pay some of the highest taxes here in Canada, and it already happily takes equalization payments, how does Alberta propose incentivizing other provinces such as Nova Scotia to reform federal transfers and equalization?
That's a good question. Develop resources. Premier, do you want to take that one?
Well, I can tell you that we have now seen every single province looking at ways that they can develop resources. And if you saw the project list today, there were mines on there. There was an LNG project on there. Tim Houston in Nova Scotia has lifted the fracking ban, and he's looking at developing natural gas not only for his own use but also for export to Europe. There are mining projects in British Columbia. There are mining projects in Manitoba. I think everyone is seized by this idea that they should develop their own resources, not only for their own use, but to develop new markets. So that recalibration, I believe, happened after the election in the United States, and we realized that our relationship with the United States was a little more fragile, a little more precarious than we had thought. So I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing, and so I would give it a little bit of time. The other part I would say is that the smaller provinces are just going to have some difficulty in being able to provide the same level of programs for the same tax rates, just because you get economies of scale by being larger. That's why I think it's so offensive to jurisdictions like Newfoundland and Labrador, who's one of the most indebted jurisdictions and has one of the smallest populations, that they're considered a net payer into Confederation and Quebec is a net recipient. I don't think this program was ever designed to have Newfoundland and Labrador, who has done the work of developing their resources, now get punished by having to transfer that wealth to a big, powerful province like Quebec. And that's part of the reason they've launched a constitutional challenge to it, joined by British Columbia as well as Saskatchewan, because they don't think that's fair either. So I think that's part of the reason why we need to have this conversation and be able to fix it.
You bet. It reminds me of a story about the ant and the grasshopper. Over here for the last question.
Hi, Kevin McBeth from Lethbridge. I just want to make sure I understand, because I actually was able to take a course with Dr. Trevor during the pandemic explaining that very difficult formula built on physical capacity and need. And I appreciate that in 2007, Stephen Harper and Jason Kenney, Calgary residents and Conservatives, formed that policy that, as has already been addressed, actually lets Quebec put a thumb on the scale. I would like to know what happened when we decided to take our already low corporate taxes and personal rates and cut them down, reducing our fiscal capacity compared to the fiscal average, and what would happen if we had still maintained those tax levels as still the lowest in Canada, and how that would actually benefit provincial coffers and actually not allow as much money to be transferred to the federal government.
Okay, so you think raising taxes may mean more revenue? Trevor, do you want to?
Yeah, quick answer is it wouldn't actually do anything directly to how much different provinces would receive in equalization. Wouldn't matter for Alberta qualifying or not. There'd be some subtle, indirect second-order effects that we can talk about afterwards, and I won't waste anyone's time, but there's really no direct connection between either our corporate rate or even our sales tax rate and how the equalization formula works out.
This is a very interesting part. We're going to wind this one down, roll another video shortly, but we do a straw poll in the room on each subject. And it never seems to line up with the microphone, at least at the beginning of the evening. So here's the question. Should Alberta take a lead role in working with the other provinces to reform federal transfers and equalization? Who says yes? Who says no? Pretty decisive. Thank you. So we're through one topic. The next subject we'll talk about, and we'll play a video to set up, is the Alberta pension plan. Here you go.
Our next topic is creating an Alberta pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canada pension plan. With a younger and more productive workforce, Alberta workers contribute about $3 billion more each year to the Canada pension plan than Alberta seniors receive in benefits. Alberta has the constitutional right to exit the CPP. And if we did, federal legislation says that Alberta would be entitled to a sizable share of the CPP assets that we could use to start our own provincial pension plan, so long as we guarantee comparable pension benefits for seniors. Quebec made the decision to start its own pension plan decades ago, and they have an agreement with Ottawa so that all retirees receive their full pension benefits, whether they worked in Quebec, retired there, or some mix of both. Alberta could negotiate a similar arrangement with Ottawa if we created our own pension plan. There are more factors to consider as well. Currently, virtually all investment decisions and management of the CPP is conducted by folks working in Ottawa and Toronto rather than Alberta. While the CPP's mandate is to maximize pension returns, in recent years, the CPP annual reports have shown an increasing focus on emissions reductions and DEI concerns, which do not always result in the highest rate of returns for the pension plan. CPP management has also become bloated and expensive. 20 years ago, the CPP had only 150 employees, with operating costs of $118 million. Today, it has ballooned to more than 2,100 employees, with operating costs of about $6 billion. If Alberta opted to commence its own pension plan, the fund would be managed out of Alberta by Albertans, and investments could be focused exclusively on maximizing returns rather than adjusting for carbon dioxide and DEI-related objectives. With that all said, the CPP has consistently generated healthy returns and is a stable and critical source of income for seniors in Alberta and Canada. So, what are the benefits of Alberta choosing to withdraw from the CPP to create its own pension plan? 1. A big upfront payout. Alberta would get back a significant lump sum by exiting the CPP. The chief actuary in Ottawa has indicated our share would be at least $140 billion. That's plenty to start and build a strong Alberta pension plan from day one. 2. Better benefits for seniors, lower premiums for Alberta workers. Thanks to our younger, more productive population, an Alberta pension plan could result in Alberta workers paying lower pension premiums on their paychecks, or seniors enjoying higher pension benefits, or a mix of both. 3. Local control and boosting our economy. An Alberta pension plan would be managed right here at home, creating more jobs and growing Alberta's financial sector. We would also be insulated from the economic and demographic decline in Canada. Our investment decisions could also be steered clear of ideological decision-making and instead remain focused on the long-term rate of return for Alberta pensioners. But there are some risks to consider. 1. Uncertain payout. The CPP exit rules aren't clear in the federal legislation, and Ottawa is notoriously anti-Alberta with its decisions. So the size of the lump sum Alberta is offered could be lower than it should be. This could result in a lengthy court battle with the federal government, and it could lower our ability to increase benefit payments for seniors or lower premiums for workers. 2. Long-term risk. As with any pension plan, if the plan is mismanaged or Alberta's economy and demographics fall behind Canada, premiums would have to rise in the future in order to guarantee our seniors the same benefits they enjoy today under the CPP. Regardless, as with Quebec, Alberta's government would still be able to guarantee that an Alberta pension plan provide the same or better benefits to Alberta seniors as they now enjoy under the CPP. 3. Portability concerns. The Quebec pension plan and CPP have an agreement in place to ensure pensioners get the same single pension, regardless of where they worked or lived in Canada during their career. Alberta would expect a similar arrangement with Ottawa, but it is not guaranteed. So, should Alberta withdraw from the CPP and use Alberta's portion of the CPP to create our own Alberta pension plan? Or should we continue with the CPP as we do now?
Looks like the lineups have grown a little bit on this issue. So here we go. Start here.
My husband was the chair of the Special Forces Pension Plan for many years, and he was also on the executive for a total of 11 years. This included several conferences and connections built with pension people from around the world. He completed the Canadian Securities course as well. He remains very interested and continues to monitor pension plans. The Canada Pension Plan is considered to be the gold standard in pension plans. Albertans have not been fully informed about the liabilities owing to the CPP if the NAPP is started. The true costs either haven't been established or are not shared with the public. My question is to the Premier. You told Albertans during the last campaign that you would not pursue an Alberta pension plan. Will you now call an election so that Albertans can vote on your actual plans rather than the misinformation given in the previous campaign?
Well, that's what...
No to the election,
But that's what this is all about. I mean, the first panel said for us to do a report and then put it to the people in a referendum if they wanted to have an APP. And so we're trying to gauge whether people even want to have that vote. So we did the report. We put the money out as what we thought Morneau Chappelle thought the transfer would be. The federal government came back with an actuarial report, which was a little closer, I think, to what Trevor Toombs' calculation would be. And we're trying to gauge whether people want to have this go to a vote. And if they do, we'd put it to a vote of the people through a referendum in the spring. But that's what this whole process is about. To your point, though, about the CPP, I often feel like sometimes people have a kind of a mythical memory of how things used to work as opposed to how they work today. And when it first began, it was a passive fund. It was managed based on ETFs with a very small management expense ratio. And it really was one of the best in the world. I spoke recently with somebody who was talking to the head of the Norway fund, and they actually said that the CPP is not very well run. They have a discretionary investment policy. They have too many actively managed assets. They have a risky investment portfolio with a high proportion of non-marketable investments. Most successful sovereign wealth in the world has none of those features. So over time, they've gone from $150 million in management expenses to $6 billion. And they're getting worse results now with their active management than they did under the passive management. So I think we just have to be realistic and understand that it has changed over time. And that's why we have to ask if Albertans are getting the best value for it. And we'll see if people want to go for a vote on it.
Really appreciate the comment, though. And I know we're going to go to Trevor and we're going to go to Andrew on this in a minute, but first there's some long lines, so let's go over here.
Hi, I'm Maria Fitzpatrick. I'm a senior. I began paying into CPP in 1968 when the first contributions were being collected. I paid into that fund for 39 years. But when I started, I had a discussion with my father, who had a small business, about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And my dad said to me, this is probably the best thing that's ever happened in Canada. He said, because people need to think about when they retire. And at the time that fund began, there were seniors who were in absolute poverty because they didn't have enough income to come in. I have watched my CPP throughout my career. I retired the first time in 2015. I retired the second time in 2019. Do not touch my CPP. I want to know when you are going to stop playing with this absolutely ludicrous idea of an APP. And if you want to look at the costs, look at the number of the change in population in Canada from when it began to now.
So, Maria, you don't want us to go to an APP? Thank you.
But what I must say is you cannot opt out of the Canada Pension Plan without offering equal or better benefits. Right. So any current recipient of CPP benefits would get the exact same and probably better, because Alberta contributors have overpaid into the fund their entire lives, and so they would be entitled, in my view, to some kind of rebate on their overpayment.
Okay. Again, lots in the lineup, so panelists, I'm going to challenge you to make a very good point as quickly as possible. Notice I'm saying that before I go to Andrew Judson, the Fraser Institute. But you guys have done some good work on this, Andrew. Can you add some context?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce, and good evening, everyone. You know, we appreciate that this is an emotional issue. The feeling in the room is the same as we've had at other panels. And frankly, there are voices who are opposed to any change in the CPP that think can focus on emotion and frankly, even fear. But there's just no question that the math, at least, the math is straightforward, that an Alberta pension would be viable and sustainable and successful, and that's just the math. There was a report published on the 14th of July by the Fraser Institute that did the math on this, so I'd encourage you to look if that's of interest. But one further thing I'll just comment quickly on. One of our panelists, Michael Binion, couldn't be here tonight, but one of the things that he keeps coming back to is there are some things that Quebec has done very successfully, and that is to demonstrate a capacity for governance, for responsible government. And in that capacity to administer and execute the functions of government, which, you know, for better or worse includes taxation, we'll be speaking to that later this evening, to be administering public safety and security, again, to follow. And one of the things is to administer a pension. So a part of this effort is to think about that overall capacity as a province to mature and to demonstrate the capacities for responsible government.
Perfect. Andrew, thank you. We'll go over here.
Real conservatism no longer exists in Alberta. Since the 2023 provincial election, the United Conservative Party has turned from conservatism to reactionism to separatism. Nobody wants an Alberta pension plan. Nobody really wants to get rid of the RCMP. None of this is going to address the real concerns of Albertans. None of this is going to get a pipeline built. The UCP has scared off foreign investment, threatened jobs, and caused layoffs which only serve to hurt the economy. Now is not the time for division. Now is not the time to be talking about getting an Alberta pension plan. Premier Danielle Smith, how can you say that Albertans like the idea of an Alberta pension plan when the Alberta Next Panel is using extremely biased videos to try and get people to answer questions the way you want them to answer them?
Here's what we'll do. Premier, can I take this?
Could maybe Adam Legg comment on the investment climate?
Yep, sure. Adam is with the Business Council of Alberta. He could. But I was just going to say, sir, to the question, we're going to ask everybody in this room a straw poll on this question afterwards. So we'll see if everybody agrees with you or not. Okay, let's go over here, Adam.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Premier. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. I know it's these are important conversations. I would say a few things. First and foremost, my organization, like the Premier states, believe in a strong Alberta in a united Canada. So that's a fundamental piece, important for me for why I'm here. But it's also important because this is really tackling fairness and functionality in the country, because Canada is a work in progress. We haven't quite figured it out yet. It's still, despite our age as a country, we still need to make sure we're fair, treating our provinces fairly, our people fairly, and that the country functions well. In terms of, I mean, some of the proposals are not directly business issues, but the investment climate is such that capital is struggling to come here, and we've seen it in some of the projects that aren't getting built, some of the revenues that aren't coming to Alberta, largely because of federal obstructionist policy. And to send a message to Ottawa that this is just, we are not happy with this. We want to see the things change, but we want to stay a strong Alberta in a united Canada, because we still need to do some work. There are some elements of the proposals you heard tonight that are very positive for a business climate. Immigration changes and having more control provincially, that's where we see the business needs and the population needs. I think that's greater control here is warranted. The pension plan could be a potential way for Alberta to differentiate itself, to attract and retain people if there are lower Alberta pension plan premiums. Same on the income tax collection. Crime, our organization just did some surveys of our members, and 94% of members felt that crime and safety was the #1 issue at a local level. So having an Alberta police force could substantially address some of those issues. But, you know, we are critically invested in this province and seeing it succeed, and to chart the path where we can see policy get back to a reasonable level, get fairness and functioning of the country back to a more balanced state.
So good.
And I think we can be a very strong province in Canada.
Over here. Sorry.
In Blackfoot, I am Peter Puta. You might know me as David Carpenter. On Alberta's earliest exit, CPP liability for pensions accrued and accruing will be almost $2 trillion. And Alberta's pro rata obligation due to employment in our province must be legally assumed. UCP continues to erroneously insist that Alberta is entitled to 53% of the CPP asset base, but have never once told Albertans that they, their children, and their grandchildren will be legally responsible for the debts those assets represent. Political question for the Premier. What is UCP's estimate of the share of the $2 trillion debt that 4.8 million Albertans will have to assume from 38.2 million Canadians so that the UCP might access these funds from CPP?
We'll get to, go ahead and answer, Premier. I'm just going to ask everybody to tighten
just a couple
it up
things. I mean, we did have a Morneau Chappelle report that said that we would be entitled to over $300 billion. In the video you saw, it said $140 billion, so that's a lot closer to the estimate that Trevor Tombe gave, and he can maybe talk about why he made that estimate. But I would say that there's a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, about how CPP is funded. It's funded by today's contributors, pay for today's recipients, and then whatever is left over goes to the CPP fund and then gets invested. And so today's contributors in Alberta contribute $9 billion. Today's recipients get $6 billion. So $3 billion year after year of Alberta ratepayers' money goes into the CPP to get reinvested. Not every other province has that same level of overage, and so we don't have a fully funded plan. It's just not the way the plan has been set up. It's set up as the you pay as you go, which is why the video suggested that there is a potential risk that if somehow it flips and we end up not being able to attract young people and create jobs, there is a risk that amount of contributions will be lower. But I think Trevor Tombe also can tell you how much assets needs to be in the fund for it to be equally solvent to the CPP. It's a number that's a lot lower than you might think.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in right. Yeah, I'll jump
Trevor,
in and
please.
maybe answer that question too. As the Premier noted, the CPP currently has unfunded liabilities in it. It's a partially funded plan, and worker contributions make up for that over time. And an Alberta pension plan would similarly be structured to rely on worker contributions to make good on those commitments for future retirees. And so there's nothing novel or the debts that the Alberta pension plan would take on are any fundamentally different than what's currently in the CPP. What Alberta has in terms of an advantage for sustaining a pension plan is demographics. There's about 3 workers per retiree in Alberta compared to about 2.5 workers per retiree in Canada. And that might sound like a small difference, but it's enormous in terms of what you would need as a contribution rate to sustain a plan. And so there are real benefits there. And so to the number the Premier noted, what my calculations suggest you'd need as an initial endowment of an Alberta pension plan to have just the same contribution rate as a Canada pension plan is only about $20 billion. And that's how large the demographic advantage is. But all policies have trade-offs, this one and any other policy you might have in mind. And the trade-off here is primarily risk. What do Alberta demographics look like in 2080 and beyond? And so I think, a lot of us here on a lot of these issues have some priors that come with us, support or opposition, and that's great, and that's fine, and that's what we're here to talk about. But it's important that we all keep in mind that almost any choice we face has benefits and costs, and we need to be clear about what those are and then weigh them against each other.
Thank you, Trevor. I have to make a reminder to those in line, 45 seconds, and to our panelists, just tighten it up a little bit, please, because these lines are really long and everybody's not going to get to their questions. So some of you are going to wind up coming back at the end to ask questions when we open this topic up again. But that's the reason I keep reminding people. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
This government has already spent $1.8 million on the LifeWorks report, $7.5 million on the APP ad campaign, for a total of $9.3 million. Yet the online survey results indicated that only 10% of Albertans support APP. Why is this government continuing to push an idea that Albertans clearly have rejected? And why is this money not being invested in education or health care?
Thank you, Kathy. We'll do another survey at the end of this topic. Let's go over here.
Hi, my name is John Trocato from Tabor. I was wondering, has there been any thought given to offering an option to Albertans to opt into APP or staying in CPP?
Yep, that's a great question. There's a reason we can't. Who can do it quickly?
I don't know if I can do it quickly, but my understanding is it's all or nothing. We had the option when the plan was first set up to set up our own. Quebec decided to do that, and so that's what their Caisse de dépôt at Placement is about. That's their investment vehicle for their people's investment premiums. Whereas we decided to stay with the CPP. So my understanding is there isn't a hybrid model. I know that's been suggested before, that let those who want to stay with the CPP stay with the CPP. Let those who want to start with an APP go to an APP. And I think it's because of what we were talking about earlier, is that it's today's payers that have to pay for today's retirees. And so if you had today's payers all go into one plan, and today's retirees all be in the other, there's a mismatch. I think that's part of the reason why you have to be all in or all out. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, needed to be addressed to. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Daniel, not Danielle. I'm having trouble understanding why we are here to begin with this consultation. I'm under the understanding that we elect people to govern us. So please, govern. Please spend our money wisely. I think we need to take care of Alberta first and not have all these other little pet projects, which I'm not sure where they're coming from, like APP. Stay in your lane. I think somebody used in the news a little while ago. Stay in our lane, Alberta. I believe we spend approximately 50% of our budget on health.
Daniel, we're over. You're joking. No, I'm not. 33% Daniel, just hang on a second. Hang on a second. If you want to ask a question, If you want to ask a question, get to it.
I will give you the question.
All right, quickly.
Can you turn on the microphone, please? Thank you. The question is, when are we going to decide to take care of the business in Alberta, like health and education, instead of all these other...
All right, gotcha. Okay, let's go over here. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Let's go over here.
Name is Richard. As far as I can see, the risks of the APP are essentially the same as the risks with the CPP, other than maybe the risk with the APP is a little bit narrower, confined just to Alberta rather than all of Canada. But there's no foreseeable reason why the demographics would change or Alberta productivity would change. So I think the numbers work out really well. I think it's a great idea. And I think we should bring the Alberta pension plan here, because governance from a distance is almost always worse than governance locally. Governance locally.
Thank you. Okay, it's time to ask the question. Those of you that didn't get to it, we went over time. We will come back to it at the end. You can come back to the microphone if you didn't get to discuss this or you had a great point that you want us to hear. So here's the question. Should Alberta create a pension plan with the same or better benefits than the Canadian pension plan? Hands up who believe yes. Hands up who believe no. Okay, so the yeas have it. Here is the next video on a potential provincial police force.
Our next topic is the potential creation of an Alberta police service to take over community policing from the RCMP. Today, roughly 80% of Albertans are served by local municipal police services, such as the Calgary, Edmonton, and Lethbridge City Police Services. However, Albertans living in most rural communities and a few mid-sized cities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie are policed by the RCMP under Alberta's policing contract with Ottawa. And as is the case with most federal agreements, Alberta is getting shortchanged. To be clear, RCMP police officers and staff aren't the problem. They do all they can to protect us with the resources they have. The problem is Ottawa. Because the federal government is failing to provide the number of promised officers and resources to Alberta communities under the policing contract, response times are slow, staffing is stretched thin, and officers are often moved across the country at a moment's notice, resulting in little connection to the Alberta communities they serve. Furthermore, because of French language requirements, English-speaking Alberta officers do not qualify for senior RCMP positions. And ultimately, the RCMP's policing priorities are chosen by the federal government in Ottawa, rather than the provincial government in Alberta. Even the federal government itself has recently stated the RCMP should transition away from contract policing when current agreements expire in 2032. Ontario and Quebec have had provincial services for over 100 years. Why not Alberta? So, what are the benefits of Alberta withdrawing from the federal policing contract and creating our own provincial police service to provide community policing? 1, more local, more accountable. An Alberta police service would be run by and for Albertans, accountable to our province and not to the federal government in Ottawa. Police officers and support staff could build long-term careers in the Alberta communities they know and love. And any current RCMP officers and support staff working in Alberta would be invited to join a new Alberta police service. 2, safer rural communities. With local recruitment and stable placements, rural response times would improve considerably from where they are now, and coverage would become more reliable and tailored to each municipality and region. This is especially important in underserved rural Alberta communities. 3, flexible, made-in-Alberta solution. Most Albertans already have local police services. The province would assist larger communities like Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and Airdrie to transition to their own police services, while smaller, rural communities would be policed by the new provincial police service. And of course, nothing would change for Edmonton, Calgary, and other communities that already have municipal police services in place. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. One, startup costs. Establishing a new police service requires significant initial investment. Hiring officers, buying equipment, building training infrastructure, and training personnel. Ultimately, the startup costs could reach into the hundreds of millions over several years. 2. Loss of some federal operational funding. The federal government currently covers 30% of RCMP contract policing costs. It is therefore likely that there will be additional ongoing operational costs for the province. However, municipalities would not be saddled with those costs. So, should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP?
Let's start over this microphone this time.
Hello. Boy, Mayberry. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a bunch of little town cops. Well, I got a question for you. A couple of years ago, the provincial government shifted a third of the costs of policing in this province onto the municipalities and didn't do a damned thing to help them pay for it. Is that going to continue? You're going to have an extra 30% minimum coming from the federal government, extra costs. Is that going to go back on the municipalities? This is a stupid idea. It's a very stupid idea. It's an idea that's just knee-jerk. Okay. Oh, we want to have Andy Griffith, or we want to have that sweet little cop from downtown. It don't happen that way.
Okay.
Look at the states.
Okay. Lots of communities would beg to differ, but you're entitled to an opinion, of course. Over here.
Okay, I'm Mrs. Cooper, and I would like to ask if we will have local police. Can you make sure that we don't follow the federal law and we don't release criminals like they do in Ottawa?
Well, this is a perfect time to introduce you to Justice McDonald, who can give us a little bit of history on Alberta Police, and also to the lady's question, Mr. McDonald, on the catch and release system that the federal government employs and what we're able to do in Alberta.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep it short in regard to our timing here. I have about 4 comments to make. First of all, Alberta did have its own provincial police from 1917 to 1932 when Ottawa unilaterally decided to withdraw the RCMP from Alberta as its provincial police. So Alberta was forced on very short notice to create its own force. It was called the Alberta Provincial Police, which ended up being very, very well regarded by Albertans as a professional force. Unfortunately, in 1932, the province's financial circumstances were dire, probably on the verge of bankruptcy, and so the force had to be folded, not for operational reasons, but for financial reasons. Number 2, we now know, as of March of this year, that the federal government, in a white paper it released, that is contemplating very seriously that the RCMP get out of contract policing altogether. So it's the way it looks now, it's not even going to be a choice for the province. They're going to have to do like they did in 1917 and get a provincial police force in place where the RCMP currently does the policing. The third comment I would make, this is, I think, our 6th or 7th town hall, and in the areas that are currently policed by the RCMP, when we do our straw polls, the support for an Alberta provincial police is anywhere from 90 to 100%. So I think that tells you a lot about the people that out in the areas, not Lethbridge, you have your own police force here, not Calgary where I'm from, we have our own police force, but they're very concerned, and part of that problem is that the RCMP is constantly undermanned. Lastly, with respect to the catch and release, that's nothing the police have any control over. That's in the courts, and specifically that's governed by the Criminal Code of Canada and the provisions dealing with bail reform. Now, I know our Premier is working with other premiers to try and get Ottawa to change those so it makes bail, particularly for dangerous offenders, much more difficult to obtain.
All right. Packed a lot in there, but it was worth it. And I'll come to a couple more on rural crime in a second, but let's go to the lines. So, sorry. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for all your work you're doing. My question would be, if we have our own police force, would we have more control over our legal gun owners not being harassed by Ottawa as much?
Well, I can tell you that I'm prepared to fight that one out. I read a legal paper. I read a legal paper that said that, yes, the federal government has control over criminal code, but provinces have control over administration of justice. And from time to time, when provinces deem laws to be offside with what the people want, their power is non-enforcement. We saw that across the country with cannabis laws. Massive non-enforcement on basic possession and ultimately got legalized. We saw it in British Columbia. They had non-enforcement of all range of drugs, all the way to hard drugs. They've since turned back, realizing that didn't work for them. But we have no interest in enforcing federal gun confiscation regimes imposed on our law-abiding gun owners. And so we have, but to your point, I do feel like we would have more direct control over the sheriffs, for instance, who report to us, as opposed to RCMP that has its own command and control structure through not only its own hierarchy because they're a paramilitary organization, but ultimately reporting to the federal public safety minister.
Go over here next.
Again, it's John Trocado from Tabor. I'm just wondering, there's been rumors, and well, more than that, there's been circulation that rural municipalities and small communities are going to see a 57% increase with what they're going to have to pay for their policing, their one-third policing through the RCMP. This is becoming very unaffordable for small communities and rural municipalities.
Sorry, just clarify before you go, that they're going to receive an increase from the current RCMP?
Yes.
Okay.
That there's been communication from the government of Alberta that there will be a 57% increase. I'm wondering if that's going to take place in the spring or if it's going to be postponed for another year, because it'd really be nice to know that prior to making budgets.
I'll have to check with Mike on what the timing is, but this is another reason why it's complicated when we don't control the budget or the negotiations, is that the negotiations are done outside of our jurisdiction and mandate. And we've been offering what we think are fair wage increases to our other unions, but in this case, RCMP are now up to about $203,000 for a cost of an officer all in. And one of the things Grand Prairie found, because they just said, gee, I wonder if we can get a cost savings by moving to our own police service. They could, but they chose instead to get a full complement of officers. So they're going from 55 officers under the RCMP to 90 officers when they unroll next year, and ultimately growing to a force strength of 110. And part of it is just they're able, with it being closer to home and different priorities, that being able to have a lot of competition. I think we did a call for resumes and 200 people signed up for it. The other levels of forces are just a bit more cost effective. And so that's what every single jurisdiction has to do, is to make their own determination. One of the other frustrations that we have is the number of detachments that have become very diminished. In some of these rural detachments where they're supposed to have, in the case of one that Mike visited, 23 officers, they only had 5 or 6. And part of that is that you've got stress leave, mental health leave. RCMP officers are called away to duty to do policing, federal policing priorities in other provinces from time to time. And so this is leaving our rural municipalities short. So that's what the municipalities have to determine. Are they getting all the policing that they're paying for? Are they paying for vacancies? And would there be a way for them to get a higher bench strength with the same amount of money?
Thanks, Premier. Stephen, I'll come over to you in a second for some context on First Nations communities. First, I want to get to a line.
Hi, so I'm hearing a justification for moving to Alberta Police Force is that people are not getting the service that they expect in the time that they expect it. I did ask our police chief at one of his town halls. I understand we have our own police force here, just to be clear. But how many calls they're taking, like what percentage are they taking that are not police calls? And I'm pretty sure that he told me it was over 50%. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of support services could be put in place, which is your jurisdiction, to offload that? Because very clearly he told me that in a public town hall, so it's not a secret. And so I'm just curious, you know, within your own jurisdiction, how can you offload that? I'm sure that RCMP are experiencing that in rural communities. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Premier. I know we've increased sheriff presence on some of our forces. Do you want to quickly address this one?
Well, just a couple of things. What we've done in Edmonton and Calgary is a navigation center where we bring all the social services together under one umbrella. And then when officers are removing individuals from the streets and encampments, they can take them there and they can get the wraparound services and get connected with housing. We're in the process now of figuring out how we can roll that out to our mid-sized communities. We've got a significant problem in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. It's a little bit different because you want to be able to leverage the work that is being done in local communities, but it's worked very well in our large ones, and we've done it with great collaboration in Calgary and Edmonton. When it comes to, I'll just mention the way we're using our sheriffs. We are already changing the law so that our sheriffs are going to be affirmed as police, because what has happened is a lot of them went and worked at other law enforcement, RCMP, Calgary Police Service, Edmonton Police Service, and others before they came to us. So we believe that there's about 650 who will be able to be registered as police right away, and then about another 600 that'll be peace officers that will be on a pathway to become police officers. So that's going to be a 1,250 force strong in our sheriffs as we start standing that up, compared to about 1,400 RCMP. So that just gives you an idea of how much additional bench strength we'll be able to bring with the sheriffs. The other thing that we have found is that we have had to build specialty forces out of our sheriffs. So when you hear drug houses being shut down, that's our sheriffs. They do surveillance. When you hear a fugitive apprehension, they've caught thousands of bad guys out on warrants. That's our sheriffs. When you hear the border security squad, that's our sheriffs. And we also have they do executive protection as well. So they are very highly trained. They have very highly trained units. And so I think that's part of the reason why people are saying perhaps the sheriffs could be opening detachments in some communities to augment the forces that are in the area.
Okay. And obviously community choice matters a great deal. And Stephen Buffalo would probably tell us that's exactly how it is on the First Nation. Stephen?
I can't tell you exactly, but what I can share with you is, thanks, Bruce. You know, the Blood Tribe, obviously very visible. They have their own police service. Up in Calgary, the Tsuut'ina Nation, they have their own police service. And I know Siksika is working on something within their community as far as policing. And obviously, when you look at this, this is about need and safety of community. And, you know, despite the fact you're down south here, you go north in Alberta, you know, the response times are a bit different in who they're dealing with as far as the law of the land. But, you know, when I report this back to some of the First Nations leaders, it's really up to them, you know, to find the financial resources to do it. And there's proof already that it can work. Secondly is having the human resources to fulfill those jobs and what have you. But it can work.
Yep, for sure. Stephen, thank you. Over here.
I had a question, just a quick comment. First of all, thank you very much for having these town halls. These are awesome. I come from an RCMP family. RCMP are overworked, understaffed. We need this. I live in a rural area. We need provincial policing. You that live in a city, you have it. No problem. That's it. We need it.
Hey, ma'am, before you go away, can I just ask you, RCMP family?
My brother and my father are RCMP.
Okay, so this is a great point to make this point. When we discuss this, just recognize nothing but respect for the men and women
exactly
in the RCMP.
Like you said, the transfers, they're not there in the community. They got to go somewhere else.
100%. It's the bureaucracy and the management of it that
we need provincial policing.
Thank you. Over here.
I'm a rural Albertan. A real rural Albertan, as in very, very rural. And so I can't tell you how we operate on a little different level. We have gates on our property because people will come and take your copper and take your wires and kill your horses and into your property. So there is a luxury living in a city that has its own police force. No, we love the RCMP that we do have, but it's very limited. We like the sheriffs that we have, but it's very limited. I can't tell you how important connection to your community is when you're a rural Albertan. So thank you for having this conversation, because it's very important, and our community, I support it, and I know many in our community do. So.
Hey, thank you. You know, I was just thinking we've got a couple of rural MLAs. So Tara, well, we've got a few, but Tara and Glenn, could I ask you both for some context? I know this issue means a great deal to both of you. Tara, you were recently at the doors. Why don't you kick us off?
Thanks. Yeah, my family farms. We've experienced the issue with rural crime, and it is very difficult because our RCMP, the distance, the response, sometimes they, more often than not, they can't come because they're too late. And I'll keep it short. I won't tell the story of chasing down the criminals and him telling me to stop. And but what I will say, when I was at the doors, because I'm representing a rural riding, I was already well aware of the problem. But I did speak with a retired RCMP officer. I was at his door, and he was just like the lady who spoke. He was fully in support because there aren't enough of them. And he has very clearly said things have changed to the point, actually, he discouraged his son from joining. He was a very proud RCMP officer. Another door was a gentleman who actually is with Calgary Police, but he lives in the rural town because that's where he wants to be. He also said he sees the need because he lives in the community that is underserved.
Glenn from north of Edmonton, what do you hear in your area?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Bruce. So I come from north of Edmonton, constituency that's just about 4 hours drive from one side to the other. Rural crime is a concern that's been probably elevated over the last 10 years that I've been an MLA. But the one thing that I'm responsible for is to ensure that we can have in place the best enforcement possible. When it became evident that the federal government was looking at ending contract policing with the RCMP in 2032, it's paramount that as elected representatives we ensure that we're ready for if that would happen. And it would, for myself and for my constituents, I think it would be irresponsible for the government not to take a look at options going forward and to do the best that we can to ensure that that would be a seamless transition if it was to happen.
Let's get one more in on this subject.
I'm a radical conservative Albertan, but I grew up in Ontario where the OPP was the local constabulary. I'm 100% behind getting an Alberta police force, just 100% behind it. I took many rides home in those old PP cruisers at night, but they were good.
Hey, don't go away. Come back. Sir, I've got to ask you a question. Do you know who Roscoe P. Coltrane is?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
I also have 2 active relatives that are RCMP officers and 4 uncles that have retired.
Well, thanks to all of them. Thank you. Okay, here's the question, folks. Should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP? Who says yes? And who says no? Besides the guy that came up and said we'd all say no. Sorry, shouldn't do that. Okay, the next subject is the constitutional changes. Let's go to that video.
Our next topic is Alberta taking a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights. The Canadian Constitution, including its Charter of Rights of Freedoms and sections on the division of powers between the federal and provincial governments, is foundational to our democracy. The enforcement of the Constitution by governments and the courts ensures our rights and freedoms are protected, and that our provincial and federal governments generally function as they should. But no document is perfect. Some things that made sense 150 years ago may no longer make sense today. That is why the Constitution contains an amending formula that permits the Constitution to be altered should enough provinces and the federal government agree to it. Over the last decades, several outdated and unfair problems with the Constitution have been identified, but no tangible progress has been made to fix them, due primarily to a lack of federal and provincial leadership. Examples of proposed constitutional reforms include the following. 1. Amending the division of powers to indicate that core areas of provincial jurisdiction, including over natural resources and health, are immune from federal legislation, and to also ensure that in shared areas of jurisdiction, such as agriculture and immigration, provincial laws prevail over federal ones. 2. Imposing constitutional limits on the federal spending power in areas of provincial jurisdiction, including a provincial right to opt out of federal spending measures with proper compensation should they so choose. 3. Adhering strictly to representation by population in the House of Commons. Right now, those living in smaller provinces are greatly overrepresented when compared to those living in larger ones. 4. Either abolishing the Senate entirely or having it actually represent provincial interests as originally intended by mandating an elected Senate with the same amount of senators representing each province. 5. Allowing provinces to appoint their own King's Bench and Court of Appeal justices, rather than having those appointments made by the federal government. 6. Expanding the Supreme Court to allow for more justices from Western Canada and making prior service on a province's Court of Appeal a mandatory requirement of becoming a Supreme Court justice. 7. Eliminating the Ottawa residency requirement for judges on federal courts to ensure more Western Canadian representation. And 8. Mandating provincial approval of the appointment of a lieutenant governor to a province by the federal government. There are, of course, many other potential constitutional amendments that are worth discussion, but this is a start. So, should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution in order to empower and better protect provincial rights? And if so, which of the amendments discussed or other proposals should the Alberta government advocate for?
This one isn't, well, I was going to say isn't as spicy as the last couple, but maybe I was wrong. Let's start over here this time.
Good evening. My name is Gregory Ranger. I'm from Raymond, Alberta. My question is directed to Premier Smith and Stephen Buffalo. The numbered treaties were signed by the British Crown. Constitutionally, the province of Alberta and the federal government share the role of response representative to the British Crown. However, Alberta's role is more important as the province holds jurisdiction over land, resources, and healthcare. The federal government has not always been forthright in their role, and we are concerned about their ability to provide funding in the future and their lack of genuine concern for First Nations. We need to protect ourselves from Ottawa. Will the province of Alberta provide for Alberta First Nations people with the hope that they need for their future and become the sole representative to the Crown through sovereignty?
Thank you for the question.
Let me start. I don't know that Stephen Buffalo is going to agree with me or not on this, but I can tell you that Alberta has a special relationship with Métis nations and Métis settlements, and part of that was that the Métis had that choice if they wanted their principal relationship to be with the federal government or they wanted it to be with the provincial government, and they chose the provincial government. So we established the Métis Settlements Act. We have 8 Métis settlements that are also land-based, and a couple of others that don't have the same status, but they're also land-based. We have Métis Nation of Alberta, and we fund services on those territories. First Nations have their principal relationship with Ottawa. I have offered to assist with advocacy, because I think that we can assist the nations when they're trying to get their issues heard. I feel like our Alberta nations have the same problem that sometimes Alberta does, that the bias towards solving problems tends to be louder the further east that you go. There's 633 nations that Ottawa is dealing with, and I would say that we have the ability to partner with nations in order to elevate those. We're already doing that when we're building recovery communities on reserves. We are also building health centers on reserve. We are funding mental health and addiction. We've got Indigenous health. We fund employment services. We're assisting in wildfire recovery and helping to rebuild and play a coordinating role. So I think increasingly, we want to play a role that can be an advocate, but again, it's up to the nations because they are sovereign and they do have that special relationship with Ottawa.
Stephen?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for the question. You know, obviously the treaties were before the birth of Alberta. And right now, you know, the nations are deeming this as a big separation thing when it really isn't. You heard our Premier say that, you know, she wants to see United Canada. But, you know, going forward, you know, the treaties have a place, and it's actually seeing some benefits from it, you know, financially, you know, from the obligations that were set a long time ago. And Lethbridge is a big beneficiary of the Blood Tribe and the Piikani Nation when they come spend their money here, you know, and that's because of the treaties that were meeting those obligations. But, you know, going forward, it's tough to put 44 chiefs in front of the Premier in regards to this issue called separation, which doesn't make sense. And I think the province and the Premier have done very well as far as creating and bridging some gaps in certain areas. You know, the creation of the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, you know, it's allowing our First Nation communities to participate in infrastructure and in natural resource development. So we got a bit of ways to go, and it's just continuing to go hand in hand together in a good way.
Thank you, Stephen. I thought you'd have this all solved for us tonight. Not right. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Karma. I have been involved in a lot of situations where there's panels and mediators. My confusion is coming in with the mediator, as I always thought any mediator was an impartial, neutral third party who assisted in disputing parties in conflict or voluntary reaching their own mutually acceptable outcome. Sir, with all due respect, it is very evident where you stand, and may I suggest a different name? Thank you.
Thank you. She is not sending me a Christmas card. There is no way. Over here.
Okay, so my name's Mark Greeno, and my question is this. Back in the 1980s, we attempted a thing that was called the Triple E Senate, so that every province had equal authority in voting on what went on in Ottawa. What would lead you to believe that now that Ottawa is going to go along with it? I highly doubt it.
Yep. No, it's a great question. Like, a lot of people are skeptical, and Premier, you touched on this in your opening remarks about the fact that the Fair Deal panel, some of these things were changed, but he's got a good point. Like, why do we think they'll cooperate?
If Michael Binion was here, he would tell you about a paper that he's just written about responsible government. And one of the things he maps out is that the Constitution and our relationship and the powers that we take on, it just differs over time. This territory, as Stephen Buffalo has said, used to be Rupert's Land, and then it was the Northwest Territories, and then they split us out, and Alberta became a separate province. And then we were able to negotiate the transfer of resources through the Resource Transfer Act in the 1930s. And as we've gone along, we've just taken on more and more responsibilities. And so we have seen constitutional change. The Quebec government got the House of Commons to agree to a change that acknowledged them as a distinct society. That was one of the things that they wanted through the Mage Lake and Charlottetown Accord. Nunavut was created through, again, that kind of bilateral agreement with the federal government, and they just had a devolution agreement as well. So it is possible for jurisdictions to be able to develop changes in the relationship with Ottawa. I understand your skepticism. I got involved in politics just after Meach failed, and I was on the yes side of the Charlottetown Accord, and that one failed as well. And I think everybody felt like, what's the point in getting these big, massive constitutional conventions together only to have them fail? So we haven't really tried for over 30 years. I guess that's the question. Is now the time to try? Are people feeling so frustrated now that maybe there's an appetite with the other provinces to be able to change this? And I know Bruce might be able to tell you a bit more about the amending formula and see if there's any other examples that he can give.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, under our Constitution, there are two different amending formulas. The default provision requires 7 provinces with at least 50% of the population. That covers most constitutional amendments. The exception to that is in Section 41 that requires the unanimity of the provinces. In my opinion, it would only require the 7 provinces and having at least 50% of the population to make to move an amendment and try and get Ottawa to go along with it to abolish the Senate altogether. And my sense is that I think the Triple E Senate was a noble idea, but it's just not going to fly. It's probably going to be more viable given the way current appointments are being made for the Senate to just be abolished. And there probably is some groundswell of support in some of the provinces for that.
Thank you, Bruce. Let's go right up front.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Vanesson. I'm the daughter of Hank Vanesson, a small-time egg producer who was arrested this past spring due to alleged quota disputes. I think that we can agree with the recent political climate that the federal government will not acknowledge that supply management is not as perfect as it claims it to be. For example, since inception in 1970s, the number of laying hens a small-time producer can have without requiring a quota in Alberta has not increased. And while the population has, we have not seen that. I know we'd have no support from Ottawa, but I think it is worth reviewing and updating supply management and quota regulations at the provincial level to provide small-time Albertan farmers a fighting chance and to ensure the most robust and competitive regulations in Canada, challenging the monopolies that have subsequently been created since the 1970s.
Thank you.
Before Lindsay leaves, can I just ask a question? So, Lindsay, what should that number be? Do you have a number that you think would be fair? Because I think it's about, is it 300 eggs a day or something, and you're considered a small producer? Or maybe you can educate me on that.
So you're allowed 300, and most birds don't lay every day. So you're looking at less than 300 eggs per day. In Alberta, there's around 165 egg farmers who have quota, and that number has not increased much since the 1970s. So we're looking at basically big areas that have thousands and thousands and thousands of quota, and that just keeps bigging where the small-time farmers don't. So honestly, anything would probably just make it better, like even 500, 800, I think would be a huge change from like 1972.
Thank you for that.
Terrific. I actually have an idea. Melody, who is on our panel, is farmer, rancher, and all of those things, understands food supply very well. Policies from the federal government impact us way more than people realize. Can you speak to maybe food supply, Melody, and what we're hearing on ag?
Absolutely, thanks for that. And I appreciate the question on supply management. I think what's important for us to all realize, and this fits under this constitutional topic we're talking about, is agriculture is a shared constitutional jurisdiction, but the province's desires are supposed to override. That has not necessarily been the case historically. When we look at the decrease in research dollars that has now put Canada at the back of the 7 OECD countries, when we see the fact that farmers and ranchers can't access risk management programs because they have to have certain environmental programs in place, this is a trickle-down effect that's causing it to drive input prices, cost of production, which is now causing your food to cost more. And I think it's especially important in this area because while we all talk about oil and gas as a province, we know that Southern Alberta, we feed people. That's what we do. That's our priority. So regarding the federal policies, we need to take back the power and make it work for Albertans so we can feed Albertans, feed Canadians. On the supply management perspective, I would say there are amending formulas where they are consistently looking on a regular basis of how to amend supply management formulas and the portion that is served out of Alberta versus the other provinces. So it's something they're aware of and it's something they're working on. But I think we just need to get out of our farmers and ranchers' way so we can grow food.
seems bloody common sense. Isn't she great, Melody? She just want to charge every time she's done talking. Go ahead over here.
Yes. The only decent idea on your list was abolishing the Senate. Other than that, everything was pretty terrible. And conspicuously absent were some actually impactful and important things, such as abolishing the notwithstanding clause, which asshole governments have been threatening to use to abolish trans rights.
Can I speak to that, please?
Bruce, we are so tight for time. Do you want to? Okay. Yep, of course, Judge. I can't.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to say Section 33 is an integral part of the Constitution, just as is every other section. And in fact, the Constitution Act of 1982 likely would not have been passed had it not been for the inclusion of Section 33. So it cannot go.
Well done. Thank you. Yep. Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for taking the time to do this. And the ideas of changing the Constitution, the changes that are in there, I think are absolutely 100% spot on. The only question I have is how in the world cross the finish line? Yeah. We can't even get rid of the anti-development law. We can't convince Canada to get rid of the anti-development laws that would only benefit them. How in the world are we, like, to me it looks like a losing battle. Please encourage me.
Yep. Premier, didn't we see I don't know if it's time for this or not. Was there a headline that came out recently? Does it relate to this or?
What are you referring to?
Well, I saw something in my inbox about an hour ago that said the federal government may be moving on something. I don't know if that's all public.
I cannot confirm or deny. We're in the middle of discussions.
All right, well, let me see.
We're trying to get a grand bargain. But again, Bruce might be able to answer this as well, because many of the ideas that were in that video are not necessarily requiring constitutional change, if I remember correctly. Some of them can be done through simple agreement and legislative change, and not everything requires a long, protracted process where you would go through and have to use the federal amending formula or have a constitutional convention.
Well, that's correct, particularly with respect to the federal court. That is something that's a pure statutory court and would not require any constitutional amendment. It's legislation that we're going to have to convince Ottawa to make those changes. But that is in no way involves the Constitution.
But I will say that we almost at our table, because the premiers meet as a group a couple of times a year, and Premier Moe had put forward the idea that the federal government could not pass laws in areas of provincial jurisdiction without provincial approval. That creates parity in our Constitution, because we're not allowed to pass laws in federal jurisdiction, and they've used their power of disallowance 112 times when we've tried to legislate in their areas of jurisdiction, but they come into ours all the time. And so it just so happened, because of the way elections work, that some were not willing to commit to it because of elections, and then faces change. But there's been an active conversation about that one, and it would go through the amending formula that Bruce has talked about, that we would pass it in our legislature. If seven in total did, representing 50% of the population, it would then go to the House of Commons and the Senate, and then that would be probably the easiest way to do it. Maybe you just do it one at a time. You just find the coalition of the willing, and then you advance them one at a time and see how far you can get.
Okay, we're going to skip the panelists and go here and here for the last two. Go ahead.
My question here is, I noticed we always have, should Alberta take a leading role? I'm wondering, why is it that you feel that Alberta should take a leading role in these questions that involve the rest of Canada? I think I see costs associated with that. Do we have more to gain by us taking control, or are we being asked by other provinces to take control of, or take a leading role, I'm sorry, of these other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're just hanging on, guys. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Angela Tabak, and I live just outside of Waterton. I agree with all of the ideas shown in this video. However, these initiatives will not be enough. They do not address the root cause of Albertans' discontent, which is the imbalance of power, which was purposefully written into Confederation when we formed as a province. This imbalance must be fully addressed and rectified. in all due respect, which 7 of the 10 provinces do you plan on getting on board that represent 50% of the population? It's not going to happen. The past 4 decades have shown that the East will never relinquish the balance of power they hold over us. No amount of begging, pleading, or lists of demands will actually permanently fix this root issue. Albertans have ridden this roller coaster for way too long. We want off. The only effective option left is a fair referendum on Alberta independence.
I think there was a question in the last one, too, Premier. Before I ask this question, do you want to bookend this subject?
I can tell you that the Premier's table, you would be surprised. Part of our process is that we do communiques on things that we agree on. And we have managed to find at least 6 communiques that I've been able to sign on to where you have unanimous support. And so I would say that the Premier's table increasingly, I'm not the only one frustrated, because somebody asked, why does Alberta take the lead? I'm not the only one frustrated at the federal government interfering in our areas of jurisdiction. There's a growing understanding that every province needs to have more autonomy to deliver their programs their own way. And that's, Quebec is an obvious one that has always stood for making sure that their constitution is respected. Ontario, we signed an MOU with them. They have been the most, Doug Ford has been probably the most outspoken premier I've ever heard is speaking in favor of Alberta resource rights. Saskatchewan, goes without saying that they're a great ally. Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador is the one who advanced the equalization lawsuit because they believe it's unfair that they're a net payer into Confederation. They were joined by British Columbia, so British Columbia is unhappy. And then Manitoba, Wabkanu has been one of the strongest voices at the table in terms of development, economic corridors, meeting our NATO commitment. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, it's a little more difficult because they're such large net recipients, and Nova Scotia, New Brunswick have such, and PEI all have such an advantage of having way more Senate seats and House of Commons seats than their populations justify. But that's how I get to the 7 out of 10. And that's why I think it is possible.
Okay, here's the question for the room. Should Alberta take a lead role in working with other provinces to pressure the federal government to amend the Canadian Constitution to empower and better protect provincial rights? Who says yay? That's not one of the categories. Who says no? Okay, the yays have it. The next video is on immigration reform.
Our next topic is Alberta taking more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies, which are driving up the cost of living and are not aligned with the needs of Alberta's economy. In just over 100 years, Alberta's population has grown from a few 100,000 farmers, ranchers, and First Nations peoples to a province of over 5 million, with one of the most prosperous economies in the world. This great success story would not have been possible without new Albertans moving here from all over the world. That is why Alberta has always welcomed newcomers looking to contribute to our province's economic success and unique culture. And we always will. However, as all Canadians intuitively understand, the number of newcomers entering the country each year needs to be sustainable, and everyone wanting to come should be committed to upholding the Canadian values of hard work, love of freedom, and peaceful coexistence. Sadly, Justin Trudeau's Liberals upended Canada's immigration system for over a decade by instituting an open borders policy that permitted millions to enter Canada each year, often without any sort of proper vetting, job prospects, or needed employment skills. The results have been disastrous. Housing prices have skyrocketed. Unemployment keeps increasing as immigration outpaces job growth. And sadly, many of the divisions and disputes that plague other countries have begun making their way into ours. Further, Ottawa has ignored the request of Alberta to cut refugee claimants and student visas, and instead permit Alberta, like Quebec, to select a more sustainable and targeted number of economic migrants better able to contribute to our province's economy. What can Alberta do about the situation? Quite a bit, actually. You see, under the Constitution, immigration is a shared area of responsibility between the federal and provincial governments, which makes sense. Essentially, the federal government gets to decide who they let into Canada. But it's up to the provinces to provide the vast majority of the social programs that newcomers need. So obviously, we should have a say about who is coming here. If Alberta isn't satisfied with the number or economic qualifications of newcomers moving to our province, we may have the option to withhold provincial social programs to any non-citizen or non-permanent resident who does not have an Alberta-approved immigration status. This would likely encourage more sustainable numbers of immigration overall, while supporting the entry of newcomers that can contribute to our provincial economy. If Alberta went this direction, Ottawa could decide to fight Alberta on this issue in the courts, and there would be some additional costs in taking a more hands-on approach to immigration. However, much, if not all of that cost, could be offset in corresponding savings to our social programs. So, should Alberta take more control of the immigration system in this way, or continue with the status quo? And how can our province convince Ottawa to act more responsibly with their immigration policies in the future?
We have the chair of the Premier's Council on Multiculturalism with us on the panel, and so I'd like to start there. But before I do, sometimes when we have this topic, people somehow confuse that, you know, this is not fair to newcomers, that somebody's speaking down to immigrants. Not at all, okay? Talking about numbers and speed and all those things, let's have a great discussion on that and what we might do differently. And Samita, as a first-generation Canadian, can you explain what it was like when you arrived and what your thoughts are on our immigration system currently?
Thank you, Bruce. Yes, I do have a little story to share with you and some thoughts as well. Alberta isn't just where I live. It's where my family found a future. I came here with my husband and 2 kids. Like so many others, full of hope, but carrying our share of uncertainty. Alberta welcomed us. We found work, a home we could afford, and a community that made us feel we belonged. We arrived with dreams, and Alberta gave us the chance to make them real. Now, thousands more are coming with the same hopes. That's something to celebrate, but it also means we must act. In the last 2 years alone, Albertans saw the highest interprovincial migration in over half a century. And while that speaks to our province's promise, it also raises a difficult question. When Alberta becomes unaffordable, as it slowly is for our children, where do we turn? Rents are rising, schools are full, and jobs are harder to find. Growth is great, but only when guided by care. This isn't about blame, it's about balance. And it's about asking, where do we go from here when Alberta becomes unaffordable? How do our children and our grandchildren carve out their future if the very promise that brought us here begins to slip away? Let's together, ladies and gentlemen, build an Alberta that stays true to its promise, a place where opportunity and belonging go hand in hand, a place where families thrive, newcomers are welcomed, and future generations can still call it home. And that's my thought and my story.
Thank you, Samita. You want to start, sir?
Hi, thank you. Dennis Chinner. I had the privilege as a Rotary member in the city of Lethbridge to be able to help the Ukrainian community when they started to come to Lethbridge. Some quick statistics. Our club sponsored about 100 or helped about 115 families. There's about 1,100 Ukrainians in Lethbridge, new residents. There's about 64,500 in Alberta, and I believe it's just short of 400,000 in Canada now. Question I have is, these folks, probably 90% of them have post-secondary education. They're very well trained, very well educated, very hardworking, and yet they're considered evacuees, so they're going through the permanent residency process now, and it's just completely cumbersome, and we need to lobby on their behalf to get the federal government to actually give these people an opportunity.
Dennis, thanks for everything you're doing there. I know the Premier wants to speak to this one because it's amazing what the province has done.
It's extraordinary, and I think credit to the leadership, I think, of Ed Stelmach and former Deputy Premier Thomas Lukasik, who worked with our government to develop a network of 200 different organizations that were able to provide not only information but also supports so that people could get on their feet very quickly. One of the things about that is when we looked at I think the last numbers I saw were that there were 70,000 evacuees who came here, and we looked at how many were on social programs, and it was less than 2,000. And that to me is really the spirit of what we're trying to do with our programs, is that we bring people in who are a good fit for our economy. They're taxpayers immediately. And then because they're taxpayers, then they're also helping to generate the revenue to pay for the social services. It actually is an amazing success story. So what would it mean if we took over immigration? Well, if we were able to do our labor market evaluations ourselves rather than Ottawa, and then issue work permits ourselves rather than Ottawa, and then have a provincial permanent resident nominee in the same numbers that Quebec does the 55% of the nominees, then we would be able to address those issues. Right now, the feds don't allow us to do our labor market opinion, don't allow us to issue work permits, and then only allow us to choose 4,800 permanent residents. And our program is oversubscribed for the reason that you said. So this is why we're doing a consultation, is to see, should we assert our rights under Section 95 of the Constitution, which says that the provinces shall pass laws on immigration and the federal government shall pass laws from time to time. So we've reversed it on its head. The federal government passes laws all the time, and then we end up not being able to match. So I would say that would be one of the big priorities, because they're coming up for renewal in March as well. I don't know if the conflict is going to end. Many might want to go home, but after 3 years now, I think many want to stay and become permanent. So very much on my radar. I know that this is going to be sort of the crunch time to see how much control we can get over managing that process, and it'll come up very soon.
All right, let's go over to this microphone.
Hi, Cheryl Wright here. You had said you wanted some solutions. Well, I'm going to give you a solution with immigration and education, which is coming up right now. If you are not a Canadian citizen, education is not free. So the $12,000 plus that you quoted, it costs every student to be educated. If you're not a Canadian citizen, you better pay out of pocket. It should not come out of my pocket. And you can't say, oh, they don't have any money. I believe $80,000 out of my pocket is going in their pocket. So yes, they do have the money. And not only are you paying the $12,000 plus, but if you're an ESL student, you're paying for that EA as well. If you're an ADD student, you're paying for that as well. Enough out of my pocket. If you come into this like my great-grandparents did, and they didn't get a dime, you don't either. You pay for it. It's not free.
Thank you. This is probably a good time to say, how are things different than they used to be? Another first-generation Canadian family panelist, Dr. Benny Zhu, a bit about your story and what it's like today by comparison.
Thank you, Bruce. I come from a traditional Chinese medicine family. 33 years ago, Canada welcomed us, and we're still grateful. So back then, acupuncture was almost unheard of, and today it's regulated health profession under the Health Professions Act. So back then, immigration focus really there was a lot of programs, to help newcomers to settle in, and in return, newcomers can contribute back to their communities. It feels like almost like a partnership. So today, immigration looks totally different. Even with ongoing efforts and many programs helping newcomers, for whatever reason, many newcomers cannot find jobs they were trained for, and employers still facing shortages on certain workers because there's just not enough people. So there's clearly a disconnect, between the who's coming to Canada and what Canada actually needs, at least who's coming to Alberta and what Alberta needs, is a clear disconnect. So You know, I think maybe it's time for immigration policies to get smart again. It's just not smart enough, and we need a system where everybody wins.
Yep, for sure. Thank you. I just want to let you all know, if somebody could turn the heat up in here, it's freezing up here. We start here.
As a young person in Alberta, I was very happy to see that this morning the Premier announced the changes towards hiring youth in Alberta, that we've dedicated $8 million towards that. I was just wondering, is there anything we could do to perhaps punish businesses that are abusing the temporary foreign workers program and not hiring Albertans who are trying to find jobs?
Do you know what I'm hearing, Premier? Frustration over what we can and can't control. What can we do?
Well, I have to say I'm inclined to agree with the Conservative opposition leader that the program needs to be dismantled and then brought back in a form that makes sense. And one of the things that makes sense with temporary foreign workers is the seasonal workers who are in the agriculture sector. Down in my area in Brooks, they've actually used it pretty well, where they have work permits that then offer a pathway to permanent citizenship, which I think protects the worker if they're going to be ultimately a Canadian citizen. And it also allows for those to come here and see if the work and the environment is one that they want to stay in. But the expansion of the program into low salaried jobs has crowded out a lot of young people. We're hearing it all over. I don't know, maybe someone here will share your story, but almost every event we've gone to, we've heard of somebody saying, my grandchild or my child has to put out dozens of resumes and is not even getting a call back. So we want to take the risk out of hiring young people to employers. So we're offering I think it's $10 per hour subsidy for the first 400 hours so that they'll give a young person a chance and teach them the job skills and hopefully level the playing field against other alternatives. But I think there needs to be a dramatic rethink of the temporary foreign worker program so that it's focused on the high skill and high value jobs that might be more difficult to fill here, but also make sure that there's a firm path to citizenship.
Quick.
Okay. First off, thanks for this format. I've learned a lot. I've written lists of stuff I need to learn more about. But it seems like everything, all these 5 topics have been blaming the feds, blaming the federal government. But I wonder if you're concerned that that sort of feeds into the Alberta separatist stuff.
Yeah. That's a fair question.
You know, all I'd say is that these are ideas that have already been implemented in Quebec. And so they already have their own personal income tax collection, their own pension plan, their own immigration control, their own police force. They've also really pushed the envelope on making constitutional change. They like to be the recipients of equalization, so they're not as keen on pushing that one as we are. But these ideas have been discussed all the way back to when Stephen Harper penned the firewall letter years before he even became prime minister. And so I think that some of these ideas have been discussed for decades and decades. And it comes down to, do we have a high enough population? Do we have enough income? And do we have enough public appetite to be looking at doing these same kind of things now? If Michael Binion was here, he would say that as you get larger and more prosperous, you should take on more responsibilities. I think the analogy he did is you can't stamp your feet as a teenager in the basement and say, why don't you respect me, to your parents? You got to get out on your own 2 feet sometimes. And so maybe that's what we need to do, is just to be standing on our own 2 feet and not relying on Ottawa to do these things for us. Maybe we're large enough that it's time for us to do these same kind of things. That's why we're doing the consultation.
Go ahead.
Good evening.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. I have a couple of things here. So, thanks. I'm not so tall. I am an immigrant. You can tell by my accent, I'm sure. But we immigrated here a gazillion years ago, and I am thankful that this province and this country opened its arms to my family as political, not refugees, but we were political exiles. Anyways, my son is first-generation Canadian. He's a teenager, and I just want to kind of go back to what you were talking about, Premier. He is finding it so difficult to find an entry-level job. And as you already mentioned, other families have mentioned this before, but he has submitted so many resumes, and again, to entry-level jobs, and does not get a call back. And I don't know if this is tied into immigration or not, but these entry-level jobs that we see, you know, it seems like they're mostly taken by immigrants, you know, and I'm not trying to slam immigrants because, like I said, I'm one myself, but
yep.
I'm finding it very, very difficult. And I know that the UCP government, you increased your numbers of nominations through your Alberta Advantage immigration program, and we have seen more immigration in the last few years under your government. And I'm just wondering how you're going to change things so that my son can find a job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Premier, I don't know if you touched on this, but as you addressed that, did you mention the numbers already? Because I was multitasking.
I'll see if I can try to put it into some context, because I think all of us remember a time when immigration worked really well, and that was in the sort of 2009 to 2019 era, where Canada brought in about 300,000 newcomers a year, so about 0.6% of the population. Last year, Canada brought in 1.8 million newcomers. So you can see why there's a lot of stress on housing, on rent, on education, on healthcare, on jobs, on you name it. And so that's part of the reason why we're saying, do we need to recalibrate this? Have they gone too far? And I think we're hearing the answer is yes. When we look at our program, this is the frustration that all the provinces have, is that the way our immigration program should work is we should be putting the economic migrants first. We should be encouraging people to come here who want to set up a business or do a business investment, and then secondarily those who have a job and are going to be an immediate taxpayer. And then we have a smaller number of asylum seekers, parent and grandparent reunification, and international students. But they flipped that on its head. We had 10,000 permanent residents that we were able to nominate, and then they reduced it to 4,800. So all of the volume of newcomers who are coming into the country are not our choices. That's all federal choices. We only have the ability at the moment to nominate 4,800. And so that's part of the reason why the individual who he has a large number of Ukrainians who want to seek permanent residence. That's why the people who are from that community are frustrated, because they have come here, they have found jobs, and they want to be able to stay, but we don't have the ability to say yes.
Over here.
Hi, I'm also an immigrant. I came here when I was 19, and I came here because Canada is a better place. This is really disconcerting to me that we have us and them with immigrants, with the federal government, with everyone else. Like immigrants have potential, like you just don't know what they will grow up, like their children to grow up to be doctors. Or I came and I was just like a clerk at a swimming pool, and I ended up being a union leader. I ended up raising 3 wonderful kids who are like, and I don't understand why you're kind of putting them as immigrants as a negative thing. Also, I'm tired of you cutting down the federal government. I'm part of Canada. We have representatives in Canada, and it's really disconcerting to me, again, to see you be an ally, go and friendly up with Mr. Trump when this is the country and the people you should. I saw it. You've cut me off. Okay, thank you. You've cut me off.
Can I just ask a question, though? Can I just ask a question? I think that the question we're asking is the level of newcomers that our economy and our social services can reasonably absorb and give a good life to those who come here, as well as those who are the taxpayers. So
that's it.
I think that number is 1%. I think that we should have a more normal level, and 1% of our population in Alberta would be about 50,000. It's been about 150,000 a year. So if you think I'm wrong, then just tell me what your number is. Do you think we can absorb 1.8 billion a year?
I'm not going to get into it. I don't know the numbers, and you know I wouldn't have that off the top of my head.
But that's what the conversation is about. It's not about. It's about have there been so many newcomers come that it's now
you
impacting.
make the newcomers newcomers sound like they're the enemies that are coming in and infiltrating this country and not giving, like taking away jobs.
Okay.
And that's garbage. Everybody
Got it.
should have the same
Got it.
opportunity.
Got it. Got it. Premier asked your question, so we'll give you another chance. Premier,
I don't know if Trevor has some numbers around that, or if anyone else on the panel does. But I think that we just know from. Oh.
That's the air conditioning kicking in.
I can just tell you that the consequence of what we've seen. So 450,000 people coming to Alberta in the last 3 years. I mean, the Alberta is Calling campaign launched just before I came in, and because we needed to have people come here because we had been on a decline. Sure. But 450,000 people came over the last 3 years, of which about 200,000 were students. And so part of the pressure that we're having on the size of classrooms is you just can't build schools fast enough to accommodate 200,000 people all at once. You can over time, but that's the whole point that we're talking about is, do we need to pace the level of newcomers coming into Alberta so that we can actually keep up with the level of services being demanded? That's the conversation we're trying to have here. And I might say, I had a very constructive meeting yesterday with Mark Carney. We've actually come to an agreement on a whole pile of things that I hope you'll be able to see in the coming days and weeks. But I think that's my job, is to try to be diplomatic, not only with whoever is our Prime Minister, but when we're also engaging with foreign nations as well and trying to get trade deals. So I guess I just take a bit of a different opinion.
Premier is kind of like having a co-host for me. She's great. Go ahead.
Awesome. My question is more of a clarification on either the UCP's policy or the panel's ideas for what immigration to Alberta should be, given what you referenced, the Alberta's Calling campaign that launched in the last few years that put forward $15 million to new Canadian, to people moving to Alberta. That really the only qualification was that they worked in one of, I don't remember the number, but a bunch of trades. Excuse my stutter. I do have that. Sorry. And then when given the numbers on Alberta's own website that shows immigration down 31% in the last 2 years, I'm curious why now would be the time to put the kibosh on it when the last few years have been all about bringing people to Alberta.
It is a good question. I think the campaign was launched at a time when there was an expectation that we were still at those regular levels of immigration. Because remember, there was a disruption because of COVID. And I think maybe that's what happened, is that because there were fewer people coming in those 2 COVID years, perhaps it's the federal government wanted to increase the number. But I guess that's the question is, did they increase too quickly? And so we had our campaign going at the same time as a large number of newcomers came in. And so when I look at what I think is sustainable, as I say, 1% of the population, that'd be about 50,000 newcomers coming to Alberta, of which I think about 35,000 should be through some kind of work permit so that they have a job and they're an economic migrant. And then probably about 15,000 a year, a combination of family reunification, international students, and asylum seekers. That's just sort of my thinking about what I've seen, what I've observed of seeing triple that amount. Is just putting too much pressure on our communities. But I think before, when it was 300,000 a year in all of Canada, I think there was maybe an ability to absorb more. So that's what we're consulting on, just to see what kind of feedback we're getting from people.
Okay. Dr. Aiken, I'd like you to get in on this one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Aiken Osakwadi, and I'm a family doc. I'm based out of Lethbridge. I came to Alberta about 10 years ago, and when I moved there with my family, moved to a small rural community, and it was for the opportunity that Alberta, beckoned myself and my family, energy security, food security, a job, a place I could live that was secure. And it worked both for my family and for the community, and that's what I think Alberta offers, the opportunity for it to benefit newcomers and existing population. But since 2020, there has been a massive amount of immigration, a massive overshoot of immigration, and it's been putting a lot of pressure on healthcare, education, social services. And we, like you mentioned, we have young people that are trying to find jobs and get opportunity to find work. And I think we need to go back to fairness, to balance. We have to look after the people who are here first. Charity should always begin at home. And our people here are crying that they are not getting enough jobs, they can't get schools, they can't get opportunities to be able to get ahead. And I believe that we should resort back to the provinces determining the number, the scale, and the type of people that come here. We need to go back to the provinces determining immigration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just from the microphones here and here, and then we'll bookend this one. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Doug. Came here in '89. I'm an immigrant, and since Justin Trudeau opened the borders, I have noticed that it has not worked. It is just not feasible, and as everybody says, everything is going sky high in prices. My children are probably not going to be able to own a home, and my grandchild's definitely not going to be able to. So I'm sorry, I have to say that I agree with this question, and we should have a say as to who comes in to Alberta and how much they give.
Yep. You don't have to apologize for saying that, sir. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, and I work in healthcare, so of course I'm a little leery of all this tonight. I voted all across the board my whole life. Did not vote UCP this time, would never vote UCP again. When I listen to your stories, it sounds to me like you're pulling up the ladder behind you. Okay, you've had a great time yourself, but this is it now. We're not going to look at any other things we can do. Every country is facing trouble with immigration right now. As we send bombs around and other countries are having wars, famines, and we want to say, oh, I'm sorry, look, our kids don't have $1 million house. Our house, we have to live in a condo or a duplex, but lots of kids don't have food, they don't have housing, and we feel like we have to keep our Alberta privilege up high. That's all I have to say. Everybody here, other than the Indigenous people, are immigrants from at one point in time.
Okay.
And we feel we can pull the ladder up behind us.
Thank you. Okay, here's the question. Should Alberta take more control of the immigration system to counter Ottawa's open border policies? Who says yay? Okay, and who says nay? Okay, if we didn't get to you, you can get up for the last segment. But first, here is the last video on provincial tax collection.
Our next topic is the option of Alberta collecting all provincial personal income taxes, rather than having Ottawa do it for us. Today, when Albertans file and pay their personal income taxes, they do so through the Canada Revenue Agency, which then remits the provincial portion of those personal income taxes back to the provincial government. However, Alberta businesses file and pay their provincial corporate taxes directly to the provincial government. Quebec does it differently. They collect both personal and corporate income taxes directly from Quebecers, bypassing the CRA altogether. What if Alberta did the same? There would definitely be startup and ongoing administration costs, but it would also mean bringing good-paying jobs to Alberta instead of funding federal employees in other parts of the country. Under Canada's Constitution, levying and collecting taxes is an area of provincial jurisdiction, and Alberta could transition over the coming years to collecting our personal income taxes, as we do with corporate taxes now. So what are some of the benefits to Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes? 1, better provincial tax policy. Currently, Alberta sets its own tax rates and credits, but definitions and treatments of income are still largely tied to federal rules, which limits our flexibility to implement more effective and competitive tax policy. We saw this recently when the federal government changed the rules on capital gains for doctors and other professionals, and Alberta was effectively forced to follow those same rules as it related to provincial personal income taxes. If Alberta were to collect its own taxes, we could tailor our entire tax framework to better reflect our economic realities and provincial policy goals, while declining federal changes to certain portions of tax policies that detrimentally affect provincial income tax policy. This could open the door to streamlining calculations and simplifying provincial income taxes for Alberta residents. 2, jobs and economic opportunity at home. Collecting our own taxes would also mean establishing the infrastructure and staffing to support it, creating thousands of good, high-paying jobs right here in Alberta, instead of funding positions in Ottawa or other provinces. 3, more Alberta, less Ottawa. By moving away from the federal administration of the CRA and collecting provincial income taxes by ourselves, Alberta can exercise more direct control over a core aspect of self-government, thereby increasing our provincial independence from Ottawa. But there are also potential drawbacks to consider. 1, a long-term commitment. Establishing Alberta's own personal income tax collection agency would not happen overnight. Estimates suggest it could take up to 5 years to fully build out the necessary systems and staffing. This would be a major logistical undertaking that would require a sustained commitment from Albertans and their government. 2, significant financial investment. The estimated cost to implement Alberta's own tax agency ranges from $750 million to $1.5 billion over several years. Once operational, the system could cost up to $750 million annually and require hiring as many as 5,000 new public employees. These are substantial expenses that must be weighed against the benefits. 3, potential for added complexity. There are also practical implications for taxpayers and businesses. Albertans would need to file separate federal and provincial tax forms, although online filing would likely ease that burden. There may also be increased complexities for businesses and Albertans working in different provinces throughout the year. Now, tell us what you think about the idea of Alberta collecting its own personal income taxes.
Is it just me or is the air conditioning kicking in? It is, isn't it? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I want to start with encouraging you guys and Premier Smith. You are doing a bang-up job.
Hey, hey.
And I think there's a chance you could make a fine president for a new sovereign nation. We need less Ottawa on every single one of these topics tonight. That's the benchmark, that's the guiding light for you on every one of these, less Ottawa. There's not one single reason we should give them another ounce of respect, another moment in time. We're done being a colony, let's go. And so thank you for what you're doing, please press into this. On the tax issue, is there a reason we couldn't do a VAT tax in Alberta? I mean, I'm an ag business owner in the south here, and it's the bureaucracy just sits on us. Yep. It sits on us on tax rates, and so to the degree we could do a VAT tax, maybe that's interesting.
Premier?
We'd have to put that to the people for a vote. I mean, I know that there have been proposals in the past that maybe you eliminate personal income tax and you have a value-added tax instead. But we have legislation that says that if we were going to ever institute a sales tax, it would have to be affirmed by the people. So I'll jot down that you think that might be one of the questions that we should ask. And thanks for your comment.
The lineups aren't real long, so if you missed out on the APP or the police force and you didn't get to a mic but you still want to talk, go ahead. I've run this over time. I have failed miserably.
Directly on top.
Is there anyone over here? I can't even see. Yeah, go ahead. Maybe not. Nobody over there. Go ahead. Sorry, it's bright up here.
Hi, first I want to say thank you for taking Albertans' voices into consideration. I agree that Alberta should have more control over our taxing. I worked in accounting, and one of my main jobs was to do the underutilized housing tax, which was a failure. The people working in CRA did not understand Alberta's specific requirements. For example, we had to have a specific address for that tax when we didn't even have to pay the tax. And a lot of these farmers had rural roots. And so we would submit these forms, these tax forms, and coming back, CRA would call back, I'd say 95% of them, to say, this is not our address, we don't understand what you're saying. And so people in Alberta know exactly what a rural route address is, and we couldn't put a post office box in. I think that having a more Albertan would be representative, and how can we ensure that there isn't that lack of efficiency in our own collecting of taxes?
Let's ask MLA Brandon Lunty, because we haven't heard from him yet tonight. Can you fix that, Brandon?
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely no. Also, Bruce, I heard you open up the mics to other topics, so I'm the last comment on tax collection before we hear from everyone else. So I'll just do a tight 45 minutes on tax collection, and then we can go back to the audience. No, just kidding. I'll try to be brief. It's a really good example. The federal government never met a tax they didn't like. So this is an example of why it's important to try to get a little more provincial control. Frankly, there's a reason they're asking you how much your house is worth when they're doing your taxes now. I don't think we want to go down that path here tonight, or it will be 45 minutes. But I do think that's an example of why this is something we need to consider, we need to look at, we need to exercise a little more provincial control. Look, at the end of the day, I want to see Alberta remain the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada. That's part of the Alberta advantage. And if this can play a small part in that, I think it's worth considering. I will turn it back to you, Bruce. I can't talk about taxes without talking about our government's $750 tax cut. It's a huge commitment that we made, and we kept it. And again, it goes back to keeping Alberta competitive and keeping our taxes low. And with that, let's thank you all for coming. I do want to get to the mics and hear what we have to say on all these other topics.
Awesome. Let's do it. Let's get to as many.
Can I just add one to that?
As we can, except the Premier.
We discovered that there was a problem with the integrated nature of our tax system when people were coming to us, when the feds were initially going to bring through the capital gains tax changes, impacting a lot of farmers, impacting a lot of professional corporations. And we had a lot of people saying, can you just de-link from the federal government and not have the provincial portion go up? And we found out that we couldn't, because we have to treat income in the same way. That's part of our tax agreement. And so those are the kind of things that if the federal government puts forward policy, we have to follow suit. If you had a different tax collection agency, you could make your own decisions about how to levy those taxes. I just thought I'd give a practical example.
Okay, over.
I would like to just give a comment to you, Danielle. We've been getting surveys, and I do appreciate when you are asking for our input, but I'm increasingly seeing surveys that I can't even answer at all because there is such a slant, a bias, and just the questions that would explore different kinds of alternatives are not there. They are always having one specific thing in mind and wanting that. I would like to know who does your surveys, and have they gone through the Alberta curriculum where it does say that surveys, all secondary school students are supposed to be, and they all have been schooled in statistics and how to take fair and fair surveys.
Okay.
And could I ask you where you get your surveys? Who does your surveys?
I do all of them.
Well, there is a
Me.
There is a bit of a difficulty because we're trying to get yes/no questions, because that's the kind of question that would be put to a referendum in order for it to be clear. And so that's what we're aiming to do. We're aiming to give enough background information so that when we ask a simple question, you can get yes/no. Bill Buick has been leading the effort on the surveys. There's two other things, though, I'd say, is part of the reason we have an open mic is that if we've missed anything, you can tell us what you think we should have asked, or if there's some other issue that you think should be put on the table. That's part of the reason we do that. We also have a section for write-ins. And I think in our first week, we got 12,000 individuals who wrote in their own ideas. So that's the way that we're trying to be able to collect as much information as possible.
Okay, now, Premier, I'm going to ask you to write down the questions so we can get to them all near the end. Go ahead.
Okay, my name's Mike. I stood up at the end of the taxation, so I was the last one in line for that.
Sorry, I
so
missed you,
here we
Mike.
go. This is my concern. And I feel it's a really big one, and I'm really getting worried about it. And the reason is it's great if we're going to collect our own taxes. I actually don't mind that, but I'm getting worried that what's going to happen if in 20 or 30 years from now, we don't have the income to collect.
Same population, yeah.
Because a panelist there mentioned in 1932 in Alberta, we were so poor, we were the poorest. We were actually the poorest province in Canada.
Yep.
So I believe a lot of our wealth came from oil, and I'm so happy to live here and benefit from that. Less than 5 years ago, it was costing more to bring a barrel of oil out of the ground than we could get. What if that becomes the permanent situation? Where will we get our money if we're our own country?
Gotcha. 45 seconds over here. We'll answer this. We're going to write them all down. Okay, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, I better make these comments rather than questions. John, I grew up in Cochrane, Alberta. I came down here for university and proud Southern Albertan. And thanks everybody for the great discussion and the bravery for coming out and posing opinions and that. Alberta Pension Plan, I'd be interested in it. I want to know if Whitecap Resources is willing to pay more oil and gas royalties to make sure that that's a success. The industry, because when Peter Lougheed, I think, was premier, we were getting like 33 cents on the dollar or something like that. Now, it's progressively gone down to 7 cents or something like that.
Okay.
I don't have my numbers, but someone can fact correct me. But that's the investment strategy on that.
Okay.
Immigration, really quick. Too complex to address here with it's hard to define a problem, but we all know one when we see it. And we have to make sure immigration is successful by having.
Okay, guys, I gotta cut you off at 45. Okay, and if you've been to a mic, do us a favor and let the other people that haven't come to the mic. Let's go over here.
It's here. Hi, I just want to make a comment, and you've had a lot of people, or a few people at least, tell you to stay in your own lane, and that it's not the province's responsibility. I am so thankful that somebody finally is going after the federal government and getting some of the rights for us. I also thank you for acknowledging the minimum 35% of Albertans who are for separation. And I don't know that they're going to get there, but on the other hand, what a great tool to leverage some of the things you are trying to get from the government.
That's it.
So I just appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need to cut the lines, so we'll stop them where they are, and we're going to try and get through them and go over time.
Hello, my name is Roxanne, and I live here in Lethbridge. I don't want to separate. I want to lay 2 pipelines to Port Nelson and Port Churchill. And then when we have our ports and 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 icebreakers, because we can't afford 1 to break down. When we have our resources to market, then I think we have enough clout to say goodbye, Ontario West. You can be Quebec,
Okay.
we'll be Canada.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Fast remark first, and then the question. I'm Professor Tony Hall, and I've been looking at the history and discovering it's very clear that the parts of Canada that used to be called Rupert's Land and then used to be called Northwest Territories have ever since been treated in a colonial approach. The older polities like Upper Canada, Lower Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and BC, which existed before 1867, they get different treatment, and they are used to not being colonies. So we have been colonized to this day. The question is, we need to pull together. And this is a future-oriented question. There's a person called, and I won't give the background, William Makis. There is a long-standing exchange, at least from his side. What's the story? What is the story?
Thank you. Over here.
Hi. Nadine Lewis. I drove a couple of hours to be here tonight because I felt that it was important to, number one, acknowledge Bruce, who makes me laugh every time I... Pardon me.
Gotta be good at something.
Every time I have watched the Alberta Next Panel, and I have to tell you, it's very important. I did the questionnaire before I started watching the panels, and one mistake that was. I hope I can have the opportunity to go back. I have learned so much, and I've shared so much information after watching every panel. Fantastic.
Can I just say, you are by far my favorite of the entire evening. Go over here. Let's go over here.
Hi, thanks. I just want some help understanding why I would trust you with my tax dollars or my pension or my safety or any of the other things that you've said that Alberta should be in charge of. It's not Alberta, it's this political party and this ideology. If it was a different party in charge, you would not be asking to give you the power over all of those things. You don't even deserve the trust from this process. You have a biased moderator. The questions are manipulative. The videos are manipulative. Oh, we're respectful, hey? And there goes the mic. And there you have it. They're using you to fool you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Over here.
Okay, my name is Alan. My wife and I are guardians for a disabled adult. He had a medical situation at 6 months old. He's not capable of work in any way, shape, or form. In October, you're going to cut his AISH by $200 because the feds gave you $200. Please don't do that.
Thanks, Alan. Over here.
Thanks, Danielle, for all you do, and you're really funny. I like it. Just a couple questions. How would the APP ensure that we don't have the same operating costs as CPP? And is there a way we could put it into the private sector instead of being government run? And then have some sort of salary cap or some sort of operating cap on that. And then for police and taxes, is there going to be a union for that? Because unions cost us a lot more than they give us. And how would you encourage for immigration and stuff like that? Like if we're cutting immigration, and I'm for that.
Awesome.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marlena, and I just have a really quick question. Well, thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. I've learned a lot, but I also wanted to just ask, one of the things that I missed on the presentation is how we're going to pay for these things if at referendum Alberta does say yes to some of the things. What are the plans? Increasing sales tax, increase our taxes, or what's the plan to pay for these things?
It's great. Premier's going to tackle all these questions. I can't wait for her closing remarks. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a paraprofessional, and all these issues are really tied together, and I appreciate that you're advocating for an increase in revenue coming into our province so that we can get services. But as a paraprofessional with the immigration issue, I'm super, super concerned. Since 2020, we have had a dramatic increase in medical health crises in our youth. We have one psychiatrist, pediatric psychiatrist in Lethbridge, who is retiring in June. We have no pediatric health services at Chinook Hospital.
Okay. We're so not on Alberta Next with Ottawa, but I get it.
No,
you
but
want
what
more
I'm
money.
saying, it's about the immigration too, because our kids can't, these kids that have mental health issues can't access proper services at school. We have kids falling through cracks because we're funding second education there. And as an immigrant, I get it. Like you know what I mean? But I'm almost in tears here because our youth are in crisis.
I know. Go ahead. Last one over here, okay?
Hi, I'd just like to say that you guys are doing an awesome job and keep fighting for Alberta. We need that. I know what it's like. You guys are fighting with a jackass in Ottawa that doesn't want to listen to us. But, you know, we need pipelines built, and I hope you keep fighting and don't let off on the gas on that.
Technically, jackass isn't a swear word, right? Last one over here.
No pressure, no pressure. I just want to say, thank you for coming out and hearing everybody. I'm consider myself a fiscal conservative, but unfortunately I work in the nonprofit sector, so I'm one of the ones that gets fiscally conservative. We've all heard the phrase, instead of drowning people from the river, instead go upstream and find out how we can help them from falling in. Across Canada, the number of children and youth requiring mental health and special education services has grown significantly, with schools and social services facing mounting costs to provide adequate support.
In some cases, special needs programs cost between $20,000 and $100,000 annually per student, and public systems are struggling. Given this trend, how will Alberta shift toward a proactive preventive model that invests in children and families, especially disabilities, before needs escalate into costly? Can this government lead with upstream solutions rather than downstream crisis?
Awesome. Okay. So I'd like to do something a little bit unconventional. So, Premier, you have tackled so many of these tonight and are so great at these town halls. Do you want to come on up tonight and just address some of these and bookend this and say thank you to everybody? Yeah, come on up. And as she does, can we just have a round of applause for the Premier?
Oh boy. Well, I have a lot of questions that I'm going to try to answer here. I hope I can. I guess maybe just from a high level, these things are all linked. The issues that we're having with Ottawa and our inability over the past 10 years to get all of the pipelines built that we know the private sector wanted to build. If we had built Northern Gateway, if we had built Energy East, if we had built the Keystone XL pipeline, we would have 2.5 million more barrels per day of production, which would be generating $55 billion worth of revenue. The governments take about 40% of that, so you can do the math, and feds and us split it about half. So that might have been $10 billion additional dollars in revenue, which would go a long way to address the pressures that we have of building schools and hospitals, roads, dealing with mental health issues. And so that's why it's frustrating for us to have seen the economic loss of the last 10 years. And we just don't want to see any more economic loss over the next 10 years. And we do have, and I should just let you know, I've talked to the energy companies, there's at least 2 million barrels a day of egress they're talking about going south. If we can get another barrel per day pipeline going to Prince Rupert, another million barrel per day pipeline going to Churchill, then we'll double our production, which then also benefits us and benefits Ottawa. And I think a lot of problems get solved when people are feeling like they've got good jobs, they can take care of themselves, their families, their communities, and when governments have enough money to pay for the social needs that just inevitably develop when you have large and complex societies. So that's why I would say all of these are related. When people say stay in our own lane, well, these are our lanes. This is our lanes. If you look at the Constitution, Quebec is the only one who is, I think, fully exercising all of its area of constitutional authority. And there's lots of reasons we haven't, but that's the question. Should we now? Would we be better off now? And that, I think, is why we're having this question with you. How do we pay for everything? So I mentioned pipelines. I think that's one part of it. But we also know that if we could just align our areas of spending authority with our taxation, and the feds would align with theirs. I think the video suggested 60-40, but I had a chance to sit next to Trevor Toom, and he said it's actually our areas of constitutional responsibility are really expensive. It's actually about 70% of all the tax dollars that are spent on health services, education services, social services, and the feds' area of responsibility is only about 30%. And yet, as you've seen, it's flipped. So they're taxing more than they need to, and then dribbling some of it back, and not dribbling back enough for us to be able to meet the needs of our expanding population and their expanding needs. So that's what's created, I think, the tension. If we're all doing well, I think that that Albertans are just perfectly happy helping out their fellow citizens. But what we have seen is that it seems like the eastern provinces want the dollars to keep coming, but then they want us to keep our wealth in the ground. And it's not a given that just because you've got wealth, it's going to be developed. Venezuela is the wealthiest jurisdiction on the planet, but they can't get their resources out of the ground because they don't have the investment climate. So this is why we're having this conversation. Are there things that we can do? And we're going to continue to work with our federal counterparts to try to address some of these things so that we're also able to develop our resources again. But are we at a point now where we should be taking care of more of this business? I happen to think yes. I know that there's a bit of a mixed view in the room, but we are delighted that you took part in the conversation this evening, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. Thanks for your feedback.
I cannot believe we've spent 2.5, almost 3 hours together tonight. This has been really great. You know, a lot of people could learn from what's happened here tonight. It's been civil, you know, for the most part, right? The world's been tough the last week or two. And I think we just proved here in Lethbridge that you can disagree without being disagreeable. You can have intelligent conversations about issues of substance. And you don't always have to agree. Hopefully we get to a better resolution for all of us. But I'll tell you what, it's been a pleasure to be your moderator, to work with these guys, and to be here in front of you. So congratulations to you all. Thanks for coming.